Chapter 666. Yuan Tingshan normally acted like he was number one under the heavens in front of everyone, but in front of Great General Gu, he was a bit better, not daring to act rashly. After all, deep down, he still sincerely admired this future father-in-law who had both military achievements and martial strength, yet was powerless. Originally, the one he worshipped the most was that king with a different surname. The butcher Su Shao. Later on, in Gangnam-do, he tried to assassinate the widow Su Shao, but was seriously injured by that young immortal who could sever fate with a sword. He felt like there was no longer any good karma between him and Su Shao in this life, so he turned his attention to Gu Jiantang. Yuan Tingshan could only mutter, "If you don't want to say it, then don't say it." "I don't feel like guessing." Gu Jiantang calmly said, "You don't need to worry about the northern Jianghu, I will send you to Ji province." Yuan Tingshan's brows furrowed tightly. Ji province? The old nest of the valiant martyr Han family? I heard they were executed for the sake of Grand Secretary Zhang's prestige. Great General, at the time, you also contributed quite a bit, right? Gu Jiantang gave Yuan Tingshan a look out of the corner of his eyes. The latter shrunk his neck, saying quietly, "Either way, there isn't a single official who isn't vicious and merciless. How many people have I killed? Compared to you all, it's nothing." Gu Jiantang's tone didn't fluctuate at all. "When you arrive at Ji province, you don't need to report to me when you kill people. When you arrive at the imperial court, I will help you stop the impeachment." Yuan Tingshan was pleasantly surprised. "Really?" Gu Jiantang closed his eyes. Yuan Tingshan said with a laugh, "When there is a great battle to fight, you better not let this old one get promoted to a high official, or else when the time comes, Baoyang won't be able to bear the consequences. This old one has a death grudge with that surnamed Su and His Royal Highness." Gu Jiantang closed his eyes, saying with a sneer, "Just based on you?" Yuan Tingshan's hands held the back of his head, leaning against the carriage wall, his expression gloomy. "That day will come. Let's see whose blade can take more lives." Gu Jiantang slowly said, "There might not necessarily be a chance." Yuan Tingshan said in shock, "Great General, what do you mean by these words?" Gu Jiantang put on a fake smile, which made the fearless mad dog Yuan feel a chill run down his spine. "Sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight. But this time, those sitting on the mountain will all come down the mountain." As the throat of the dynasty that controlled the West, Jianghe housed a sizable number of war elite troops. They had both infantry and cavalry, and the 8,000 infantry were mostly mountain-top powers from the Spring and Autumn War. Most of them were the old subordinates of General Gu Jiantang, and the King of Yen was slightly fewer. The 8,000 cavalrymen were in a complicated situation where three parties were vying for supremacy. Among them, 3,000 cavalrymen were orphans without parents. The leader, Wang Ji, was a general who rose to his position after the spring and autumn period. He often led 200 to 300 elite cavalrymen into the hinterlands of the western regions to hunt. His hands were so bloody that they were almost black, and he was not very popular among his peers. Currently, he was leading 3,000 cavalrymen to kill a group of highland bandits. Other than that, although the general in charge of the 3,000 cavalrymen was not a member of the Gu party, he was a relatively orthodox member of the Ministry of War. He relied on his connections in the capital to climb up the ranks. He belonged to the foreign faction of the Sword Garret. The remaining 2,000 cavalrymen were born and raised in Swords Gate. Cavalry General He Yen had always been a fence-sitter, and he had been living a difficult life. He did not have many men under him, and he had such a spineless leader. Although the 2,000 cavalrymen were strong, they could not gain much from him. What was strange was that the various factions of the Sword Garret were intertwined with each other, and these 2,000 cavalrymen were not willing to cross the wall. The Gu party's general Wan Daicheng was the nominal commander of the Sword Garret. Today, he watched as the 2,000 cavalrymen left the Sword Garret without permission. He had already cursed the 18 generations of He Yan's ancestors in the barracks. He was about to ask his trusted aide to write an impeachment report to the Ministry of War, accusing He Yan of leaving the Sword Garret for no reason. But when Wan Daicheng was about to finish the report, he stopped. He Yan was the most cunning and slippery person. Why did he suddenly take the wrong medicine? Earlier, when he had personally gone to intercept them, the 2,000 riders had charged straight out of the city. They had the arrogant attitude of wanting to kill anyone who blocked their way. This made Yuan Daiqing almost think that there was a mutiny and could only avoid them. At the time, he was only glad that he had caught something on them. Now that he thought about it, Yuan Daiqing calmed down and his abacus sank deeper. He picked up the memorial from the desk and slowly burned it with a match. He said to the startled scholar, "Change it to a secret letter. Find a trusted courier and send it 500 miles to the capital. Personally hand it to the minister." At this time, a dusty man with a clean face and no beard broke into the tent. Yuan Daiqing was angry at the incompetence of his guards, but when he saw the man's face, he was surprised and nervous. He was about to say something to please the man, but the eunuch stomped his feet and pointed at Yuan Daiqing's nose and scolded, "Useless thing, why didn't you stop He Yan's 2,000 cavalrymen?" Yuan Daiqing was stunned. He was thinking about how to remedy the situation. The eunuch who served the empress for many years in the palace waved his sleeves and left. He left a sentence that made Yuan Daiqing's legs go weak. "Yuan Daiqing, you'll be kicked out of the sword pavilion. Useless." The baffled Yuan Daiqing stood rooted to the ground. After a long time, he came back to his senses. There was no third person in the tent. This general with real power only dared to curse in his heart, "Son of a bitch, do you have balls?" Outside the sword gate, 2,000 cavalrymen galloped like a flood. In the distance, there was a man with a head full of silver hair. He was wearing a bright red coat because of the gallop. He was extremely arrogant. He had stopped Chao Chongqing 3 times in the Liang Palace. Once, the eunuch was only 100 steps away from His Majesty. But he was still stopped by the head of the eunuchs in the world. Previously, when Bai Hu came out of the Bailiang Palace to get married, it even alarmed the king of Bailiang. Su Shao asked with a smile, "She's married already?" Bai Hu said calmly, "Take a breather. I'll be back soon." Su Shao put his hands in his sleeves naturally and asked, "It doesn't count, right?" Bai Hu nodded, "Of course." On this day, Nangong Push, who was known as the most beautiful woman in the world, left Liangzhou and disappeared. Almost at the same time, in the vast western region, a horse was riding slowly. The man in white held a dark purple spear in his hand. The spearhead was not inlaid, making the spear look more like a stick. The name of the spear was Plum Wine. Chapter 667. He rode in the front. The hot wind in the desert blew against his face. The rope on his cloak gradually loosened and then fell into the yellow sand. It revealed a shocking, bright-colored python robe. The eunuch was followed by 2,000 cavalrymen of the sword garrett a full mile behind him. There was an iron law in the Liang dynasty that was clearly engraved on the dragon's steel: no eunuch was allowed to leave the palace. After the Liang dynasty became peaceful, there were only a few exceptions in the past decade or so. The first time was when Princess Sui Zhu sneaked into Beimang. After the head eunuch of the Imperial Horse Directorate returned to the palace, he died not long after being entangled by his red threads. Another time was when he went to pick up the emperor's illegitimate son Zhao Kai. Even though it was the emperor's order, he still used half of his friendship. Mobilizing the 2,000 cavalrymen behind him that were only loyal to the royal family was still a quiet move by the emperor on the chessboard of the world. He also used half of the remaining friendship between master and servant. But Han Xingxian, the most powerful official whose real name was very unfamiliar in the court, didn't regret it, let alone think about the emperor's fickleness. The human cat Han Xingxian was greedy for power. Otherwise, he would not have held power alone for so many years. However, he knew who he was greedy for. Back then, when the emperor was still the weakest prince, he was willing to die for the emperor. When the emperor sat on the dragon throne and had children, Han Xingxian chose to call him Great Master Zhao Kai from the very beginning. Han Xingxian was the son of that gentle woman. Han Xingxian had eaten a few meals personally cooked by her. He was not the least bit despised by her as a eunuch. "The world bullied me, Han Xingxian, once, I will bully you all my life." If she respected me, I'll respect her 1,000 feet. She died early, so Han Xingxian repaid her kindness to Zhao Kai. Han Xingxian was never educated and didn't know many words. He also never cared about national laws or human relationships. The emperor and the prince Zhao Kai were the only rules. Han Jiaoxi only cared about these two family rules in his life. Spurring his horse forward, Han Jiaoxi saw the dense cavalry formation in front of him. The old eunuch, who did not carry any weapons, raised his hands and twirled 2 strands of silver hair hanging down from his temples. His hands were bound by 3,000 red threads. Once he killed all the rebels and traitors that the Bailiang had cultivated, he would be able to hand the job over to Hien. Han Jiaoxi could have easily killed the head eunuch of the Hall Directorate who went to the sword garret to stop him from mobilizing his troops. However, the cat man did not have any ill feelings towards the Empress, and he did not want to embarrass his young master in the future. Therefore, he had a falling out with her too early. Thus, he allowed Wan Daiqing to go to the Sword Firmament Pavilion and look for the good-for-nothing Wan Daiqing. He charged towards the 3,000-strong cavalry without slowing down, still in the mood to smile and say, "Black monk, don't let our disciples die here. Otherwise, as the great teacher, this old servant will tear you apart even if it means risking my life." Wang Ji, the cavalry general on the opposite side, did not relax even when facing Han Jiaoxi. Not only because he had guessed the identity of the old eunuch, but also because he knew what he was doing. Treason. Wang Ji lowered his head and touched the saber that he had kept for many years. The 3,000 cavalrymen behind him did not recognize Wan Daiqing, the commander of the sword garret. They had been fighting for many years and had even forgotten about the son of the Zhao family. His father was placed in the sword garret by Great General Su as a garrison general. Before his death, he had gathered 1,000 trusted subordinates, and in 10 years, he had gained 2,000 cavalrymen. Among them, 300 were from Bailiang who had slowly infiltrated the sword garret. Most of them were 15 or 16 years old youths. Last year, 80 of them came in one go. In the quicksand of the western regions, 800 miles away from the Sword Gate Pass, Wang Ji saw the human butcher for the first time. Wang Ji knew that it would not be long before he could use his father's treasured saber, the Bailiang saber. Wang Ji tilted his head and spat on the ground, silently pulling out the Bailiang saber. 1,000 cavalrymen retreated abnormally, while 2,000 began to charge. This was an interception that risked countless lives to stop a finger-profound level expert. Wang Ji still wanted to become a famous governor of the border, a great general who could intimidate the Great Desert. If he really died here, he would definitely regret it. But since he was reincarnated and had the same surname as his father who used to be a Bailiang soldier, he had no regrets. The plum wine was in his hand. The man who did not drink took the water pouch from his waist and drank a mouthful. Some people said that he was the best general who could turn something rotten into something magical since the emergence of large-scale cavalry battles. He was invincible in cavalry battles with more than 100,000 soldiers. Even the current emperor praised him as the white-clothed warrior immortal who could not be compared to all the other officials in the court. In the army of the Liang dynasty, who was the best in martial arts? Originally, most people said that General Gu Jiantang was better. Since he fought 2 battles with Beimang Hong Jingyan and the ancestor Bronze Man, he had become the new immortal of spears, vaguely surpassing Gu Jiantang who had extraordinary saber skills. Qin Jibao stopped his horse and turned around. A small group of cavalrymen followed behind. The horses under them were exhausted after a long chase. They saw the leading woman with a sword on her back, covered in dried blood. Qin Jibao's bitter smile flashed across his face. Chapter 668. He turned his horse around and lightly tossed the water skin to her. Unfortunately, she didn't catch it. The two of them were 50 paces apart. Qin Jibao laughed. "You guys don't even consider physical strength. Even 2,000 riders may not be able to stop me." The woman who hadn't slept for 2 days said coldly, "The 600 iron Buddhas that Dian Xiongzong deployed and the 800 crossbowmen sent by Wei Fuqing are all dead. They're really promising. They're all wearing Beimang armor." Qin Jibao said lightly, "What's the point of killing them? They didn't rebel. They just happened to appear in the western regions. Su Wisheng calmed his breathing. Qin Jibao wasn't in a hurry to make a move. He still reined in his horse and stopped. The end of his spear pointed at the yellow sand under the horse's hooves. I didn't expect you to come. Otherwise, I wouldn't have done this. Su Wisheng said sarcastically, there's a battle that Qin Jibao didn't expect? Qin Jibao said indifferently, I did, but I didn't want to admit it. I don't know why, but every time I think of a situation that I don't want to happen, it always happens. There's no exception this time. Su Wisheng asked directly, are you really going to rebel against Beiliang? Qin Jibao tilted his head slightly and asked back, who said so? Su Wisheng didn't want to talk anymore. He gently breathed in and out, the ancient sword on his back trembling. Qin Jibao still didn't show any signs of lifting his spear. When I was young, I didn't want my father to die for my adoptive father. In the end, he took 62 Qin family members to bring up the rear without saying anything. He still went. The second time, I didn't want His Royal Highness to refuse to enter the capital to be the prince consort. He didn't go. Last time, I didn't want him to return from Beimang to Beiliang alive. He survived. This time, I didn't want to see you, but you came. Qin Jibao finally mentioned the plum wine. All these years, I didn't do anything. I just wanted my foster father to slowly grow old and die in the position of king of Beiliang. Now, I still don't want to be a disloyal and unjust traitor. So, even though I knew that His Royal Highness had gone out 3 times, I still stood by and watched. The last time I didn't want to do anything, it just had to appear again. Qin Jibao bent down and took out a spearhead from his hanging pouch. He inserted it into the already incomplete plum wine. When he lowered his head, the man in white said slowly, I know that the maid in Wutongan, Blue Bird, is the daughter of spear immortal Wang Xiu. I knew that the instant spear was left in the armory. She was groomed to be a death warrior, to be used to kill me in the future. I was very clear about that. Su Wisheng, since you are the death warrior who has been hiding for more than 20 years, Qin Jibao, will let you die today. After all, the last man you saw before you died was me. I will take your corpse to Western Shu and be the princess of Shu for 10 years. This group of horses held the silver bottle that was about to overturn the current power structure in the western region. They actually stopped their horses heading west. The place where they stopped was between the Sword Garret and the quicksand. Behind the group of horses was the Iron Gate Pass recorded in the Spring and Autumn Chronicle. The pass was built by the Emperor Qin. The cliff was like an axe, and the stone was like iron. This was a steep canyon that was 20 miles long upstream of the Jiao River. It was an important passage from the western region to the eastern region. Every time the situation in the Central Plains was stabilized, they had to pass through the north and south of Tian Shan. The armored soldiers of the Central Plains had to pass through this place. Every time the horse galloped to the west, it symbolized the power of the Central Plains. Every time they retreated to the east, it meant the collapse of the Central Plains. Prince Zhao Kai got into the carriage and sat on the coachman's seat. The talisman general in golden armor stood guard beside him. When he saw a dusty old monk in black coming from the north, he smiled brightly. It was his second master, the sickly tiger Yang Taisui. When the old monk saw that Zhao Kai was safe and sound, he felt relieved. He did not say a word to his disciple, who had the potential to become a Buddha and stop the process of destroying Buddhism. He only put his palms together and bowed to the Bodhisattva. Then he silently turned around and headed east. Less than half a mile away. With a saber and a sword, Su Fengnian urged his horse straight to the Iron Gate Pass. Any prince could rush to the western region to accumulate merits and pave the way for his future ascension to the throne. They could also allow a prince to be the king of Shu who broke the ambush line of Beiliang and Nanzhao. However, a prince could not be the king of Shu after achieving great merits and then sit on the throne by destroying Beiliang. Moreover, this prince was Zhao Kai, the one Li Yishan wanted to kill. In front of him, an old monk rushed toward him. Using the great Buddhist supernatural power, he kept whispering to the hereditary king of Beiliang, Su Fengnian. Anyone can die. I 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 can die. My 216 retainers can die. Only Zhao Kai can't die. I can escort Zhao Kai back to the capital and go to the Bailiang Palace to ask for forgiveness. If you insist on killing Zhao Kai, who has the emperor's order and is blessed by fate, do you know what will happen to you? The old monk floated over. F***ck off. Su Fengnian, who had always been able to remain calm in front of his enemies, suddenly had bloodshot eyes. He angrily said, Yang Taisui, the first person I'll kill today is you. Do you still remember the white clothes case in the capital? I would rather die in the process of practicing my saber than be a useless king of Bailiang in the future. I want to kill you bastards with my own hands. Chapter 669. Qin Jibao was in the front when he left the small manor surrounded by willows, followed by the tide listening pavilion with Bai Hu-er's face. Su Shao came to this quiet manor without a tree outside the outer wall. Most of the servants in the manor already knew that there was such a person who could make General Qin, who did not like to joke, become abnormal. After sending the old man away last time, he was obviously in a good mood. Some time ago, they were still guessing if the old man could be the administrator, Li Gongda, but they felt that it did not seem like it. Sir Li seemed to have a bad reputation. With General Chen's temper and status, he would not deliberately flatter him. After guessing, they could only think that it was most likely an old general who had retired from the Northern Liang Army. Perhaps he was General Chen's old subordinate. Only the old manager of the manor guessed the truth, but he did not dare to spread it. This time, the Prince of Northern Liang came in person, and the old steward did not spend much effort. He still received him under the shade of a tree in the backyard and asked Lu Xi, who he had met before, to bring him the fruits and snacks made by the manor. After Su Shao ate a little, he stood up with a smile and asked the maid to lead him to Qin Jibao's study. The young girl, Lu Xi, did not dare to make a decision on her own, but she could not directly say that General Chen's study was not cleaned by the maids. It was all done by the general himself when he came to the quiet manor to recuperate. Being influenced by what he saw and heard, it became an unwritten rule that the servants did not go to the general's study. Even if the door of the study was open all year round, even if it was covered in dust, no one would go. The maid was in a dilemma. The steward, who was waiting quietly in the distance, quickly trotted over and personally led the general to the study. When they reached the door, the old steward quickly walked away with the suspicious maid, Lu Xi. Su Shao crossed the threshold with his hands behind his back and walked to the study desk. He saw a blank piece of paper on it. When a woman married and left home, she would bring her dowry. When a man went out, he did not marry into anyone's family. Naturally, he would be alone. The lychee finally left the branch. Su Shao put the paper in his sleeve and said softly, "This is good." Su Shao looked around. The bookshelves were filled with precious military books and historical records that had been collected. They did not use red sandalwood and yellow rosewood as bookcases to collect them. It was obvious that they wanted something that could be flipped through and read at any time. Su Shao was in a daze for a while and thought about the past. He remembered that Jibao was a very naughty child when he was young. He liked to ride on Brother Chen's neck and pull his beard. When he was young, Su Shao himself often carried him around the barracks. This little bastard was full of bad ideas. He would hold it in before he was carried, but when he was halfway through, he would piss. Since when did he become so taciturn? It was probably on the day that Jibao knelt at the tomb and buried his head in the yellow soil. Even Su Shao did not know whether the child cried or not. Later, the Bailiang army began to grow. Their iron hooves broke the gallbladder of the 6 kingdoms. Afterwards, they were ordered to enter the capital. Before the father and son met the emperor, Su Shao had a frank conversation with him. He asked if he wanted to go to Bailiang and become a king with a different surname. He, Su Shao, could retire in the capital and become the minister of war. Qin Jibao would go to Bailiang and become the only king with a different surname. He would control the throat of the northwest for the dynasty. At that time, the emperor also had the same idea. However, that time, Chen Jibao did not agree. He said that the capital was not safe and he was not at ease with his foster father being his hostage. Later on, when they arrived at the imperial court, the emperor probed again, whether intentionally or not, asking Chen Jibao if he was willing to work together with the king of Yen to wipe out the barbarians in the south for the imperial court. This was practically establishing two kings with different surnames, scaring all of the civil and military officials until their faces turned pale. Even Gu Jiantang, this type of great general who was extremely good at maintaining his composure, immediately flew into a rage. He abruptly swung his sleeves and turned around. The king of Yen raised his head to look at the roof beams of the great hall, not saying a single word. The old Grand Secretary, the current Grand Secretary Zhang's respected teacher, the leader of the civil officials, knelt on the ground and did not get up, continuously kowtowing until blood flowed endlessly, admonishing the emperor that he could not go against the rules and bestow rewards. That year, white-clothed Chen Jibao was only 17 years old, Su Fengnian only about 8 years old. During these years, Su Xiao began to be unable to see through what this foster son of his wanted, unable to understand where his bottom line was. The more Chen Jibao had no desires, the more prepared he was, the more Su Xiao didn't dare to easily die of old age. It was because the butcher knew that once he died, Chen Jibao, who didn't seem to fight for anything, would be able to obtain everything. When that day truly arrived, a Baoyang between the cracks might not be able to satisfy Chen Jibao's appetite. Back then, why did the newly ascended Zhao family son of heaven confer Chen Jibao the title of vassal king? On the surface, he was magnanimous, rewarding meritorious service, not minding the two kings of different surnames cooperating with each other in the north and south, but wasn't he also trying to have the father and son mutually restrict each other? Su Xiao didn't doubt at all that the independent Chen Jibao didn't want or couldn't contend for the throne under the heavens. Su Xiao walked out of the manor, muttering to himself, "I hope there's still time for both sides." He returned to Baoyang Palace. In the Great Hall, there were no armored guards or murderous auras. Half of the 6 adopted sons had come. Qi Danghua, who carried the banner, Yi Shizhen, who studied under Yang Kai Zhao Chengling, and Yao Jian, who was skilled in green bag geomancy and dragon seeking. Chen Jibao, Yuan Zuozong, and Chu Lushan were no longer in Baoyang. Only the 4 of them were left. Seeing their adoptive father gently sit on the chair, Yi Shizhen and Yao Jian exchanged a look and slowly knelt down. Qi Danghua didn't move. He glared at his 2 brothers who had succeeded long ago, his face full of anger. Su Xiao put his hands in his sleeves, leaned back and said, "Our Baoyang spy agency has been divided into 2 in these years. Lu Qiu'er is in charge of one half, Shizhen is in charge of the other half. Not long ago, 2 people spent 1,100 caddies of gold to buy a life, hiring a blind woman called Shui Songguan to kill Fengnian. Shizhen, your 500 caddies was the first move, the death. Lu Qiu'er's 600 caddies was the last move, the purchase." Because this blind female zither player did not go back on her words after taking the money, Lu Qiu'er's 600 caddies was a loss, but she stopped when she was needed. Whether or not Feng Nian could survive in the northern Mang, he still had to give it his all. I know that Chengling had a good opinion of Ji Bao before he died. He felt that if he could control the Baoyang cavalry, not just unifying the spring and autumn period, he could even eat up Beimang in the future. Chengling was a peerless scholar who did not play tricks. He never concealed his thoughts in front of me. Before he died, he held my hand. His last words were that Ji Bao could become a great monarch like the Qin emperor. "So Shizhen, you inherited Chengling's will." In these years, I could not find out who did not do it personally, and I did not want Lu Qiu'er to find out. But I know who was adding fuel to the fire. Also, this was Ishan's original intention for me to hide. I do not blame you for this. Shizhen, you just wanted to fight for your master, prove that Li Yishan was wrong, and prove that Li Yishan was not as good as Zhao Chengling. In these years, the hearts of the old subordinates of Baoyang have been scattered, especially those old people who urged me to become emperor. They still have resentment that has not dissipated. As to you, Yao Jian, you always believed in Huang Longshi's words about the white-robed man slaying the boa dragon. You were stubborn from a young age, and wanted to become a state teacher like Bei Mang's Qilin spiritual master. You also had the great ambition of continuing the orthodoxy of the world. If I had advised you openly, the relationship between father and son would have been long gone. You would not have been able to run all over Bailiang with Feng Nian in those years, so I endured and did not say anything. Su Shao was really old. He put his hands on the back of the chair and slowly stood up from the chair. The young general who was not afraid of fatigue and death every time he took the lead was actually so difficult. In the end, he said, "Now it's hard for me to say that I'm definitely right and you guys are wrong." Su Shao walked out of the hall. Qi Dangguo was guarding the door with his back to Yao Jian and Yi Shizhen. Yi Shizhen was the first to stand and stumbled over to pick up the jug of wine his foster father had left behind. He held 2 wine cups in one hand, and raised the jug to his nose with the other to sniff. The tearful scholar smiled and said softly, "See, I told you it was green ants, but you had to bet with me that it was yellow wine. Yellow wine needs to be warmed. You do not find it troublesome, but I do." Yao Jian did not stand up and just sat cross-legged. Yi Shizhen sat in front of him and poured 2 cups of wine. Yi Shizhen raised a cup of green ants and used his sleeve to wipe his tears. He said with a smile, "What, old Yao, you are not willing to part with your rooms of books?" The expressionless Yao Jian gripped the wine cup and shook his head. "What is there to be unwilling about? It is good to leave them for Feng Nian. In the past, he liked to steal books when he was young. This time, he does not have to worry about being scolded by me. Whether I live or die, I am only one person. But you, on the other hand, are you not worried about that family?" Yi Shizhen laughed out loud. "Of course I am. Do you think I do not trust foster father in this matter?" Yao Jian nodded. Yi Shizhen raised his cup to Yao Jian. "Shall we have a toast?" Yao Jian rolled his eyes. "No, you have never been good at drinking your whole life. When did you not have a few caddies of wine under your feet during a celebration? It was all wasted by you. Clinking cups with you would be a disgrace." The scholar Yi Shizhen covered his face with his sleeve and drained his cup in one gulp. Yao Jian drank his cup at the same time. He closed his eyes and whispered, "It is a pity there is no food to go with the wine." The two drank their cups of wine and then knelt in the direction of the door. Standing at the door, Qi Dangguo rubbed his eyes. He looked at his foster father leaning against a large red pillar outside the door. Qi Dangguo closed the door and walked to the old man's side. He squatted down and said hoarsely, "I do not understand why they are thinking so much. Is it not good to live well?" Su Shao seemed to be tired of standing. He sat on the steps and said softly, "Foster father does not know. The people who can tell me the answer, like Changling and Yishan, have all left." Chapter 670. The Iron Gate Pass between the quicksand of the Sword Garret gathered the best masters in Jianghu in the past 100 years. The number of masters was enough to shake the Jianghu of Liang and Beimang. Almost all of them had the mentality of fighting to the death. This was very different from when Chao Chongqing and Dong Tai went to the top of the martial emperor city. At that time, there were many hidden masters, but only 2 people actually fought. They just watched from the sidelines. Compared with the Iron Gate Pass, which was extremely strange to the Jianghu of the Central Plains, it was a far cry. No one could stay away from the Battle of the Iron Gate Pass as long as you appeared in the field of vision. Among the masters who had appeared in person, there were Chen Jibao, who came late with a stick of plum wine, Han Diaoxi, who was known to be good at killing celestial phenomena with his mysterious finger, Yang Taisui, the sick tiger who once stepped on half of the dragon tiger demon slaying platform, White Bear Yuanzuozong, the 3rd person in the Liang army, Su Fengnian, who was at the false realm with his mysterious finger, Su Weisheng, who carried the red dragon sword, Bodhisattva of Tantric Buddhism, Golden Armor Man, who used to be one of the 4 grandmasters, Su Longxiang, who was born as King Kong, and Blue Bird, who held the instant spear. They were doing the shocking business of plotting and quelling rebellion. The people who were killing each other were the princes who were likely to sit on the dragon throne and the next king of Baelyang. This was a chaotic battle that would soon determine the future of the western region and western Shu in Baelyang. No one dared to say that they would be the last one to laugh and survive until the end. Su Fengnian rode in the front. 12 flying swords with perfect sword embryo formed a thunder pool sword formation that he stole from Dong Tai, the god of peach blossom sword. He crashed into the old monk in black, Yang Taisui, who was the main accomplice of the white-clothed case in the capital. Yuan Zhuozong urged his horse to follow closely behind to support his royal highness, but the distance between them was 50 paces apart. Along the way, the two-faced and four-armed otherworldly item in the red robe finally revealed its ferocious appearance. It bypassed Su Fengnian and the black-clothed monk and dashed straight toward the entrance of the Iron Gate Pass. Its goal was very clear. Whoever was suitable to be used as food, it would absorb their blood, flesh, and qi. The fifth raccoon was a good example. At this moment, the Een item's nascent core's dual-faced golden eyes were shining brightly, showing a different aura from ordinary filth. Blue Bird tilted her head for an instant and urged her horse forward. She still did not pay attention to the famous black-clothed imperial tutor. She directly led the 800 white horse righteous entourage to kill the 200 imperial guards. In the Ruran Mountains, before the battle, her young master smiled and said that he would give the fifth raccoon to her. Blue Bird did not doubt that her young master could take the fifth raccoon's head. Today, her young master was entangled with Yang Taisui, so she would not do anything unnecessary. The black-clothed young man had already abandoned his horse and walked on foot, but his body was like rolling thunder on the ground, far surpassing the galloping horse. Once again, he showed what it meant to take the lead in a battle. Wang Chong of the Phoenix Battalion stood side by side with the warhorse and His Royal Highness. He subconsciously glanced at them and clenched his spear, whispering, "Lin Heng, watch carefully." This time, His Highness single-handedly took on the bald donkey Yang Taisui. He didn't let us down. Quickly leaving His Royal Highness, Yuan Zhuozong, and the black-clothed monk behind, the white horse righteous entourage began to charge. Their blood was boiling, and they were almost trembling all over. 700 of them had previously followed this unscrupulous young master who had never set foot in the military camp. They all said that other than bullying Miss Shui Ling, he only had the ability to spend money in brothels. Over the years, who didn't feel suffocated? Along the way to the west, the Baelyang young master who carried a saber and a sword did not say a word. He did not even think of saying a few words that were friendly and approachable. Fortunately, on the surface, he did not show any friendliness. Just when they were 2 miles away from the Iron Gate Pass, he said in a deep voice, "Today, follow me to kill Prince Zhao Kai of Liyang." They were 200 steps away from the enemy. Yuan Meng let out a furious roar, "White horse righteous entourage. Fight to the death." The 200 imperial cavalry began to charge at the same time. None of the 16 golden-clothed bodyguards were left behind. They all mounted their horses to meet the enemy. Zhao Kai sat on the coachman's seat, squinting his eyes and looking into the distance. The talisman General Golden Armor stood quietly in front of the carriage with both hands holding the quaint sword hilt and inserted it into the ground. This ferocious sword was exchanged with the lives of the whole family of a famous swordsmith. The puppet in the golden armor was a great guru who was skinned by Han Diaosi. Its combat power alone was enough to crush the other 4 abandoned talisman armors. The female bodhisattva of Tantra in a snow-white cassock made a mudra in front of her chest with one hand and held a bottle with the other hand. The yellow sand spun crazily a few feet above her palm and gathered into a tower. It gradually formed a star vortex. Zhao Kai held the horsewhip tightly and stood up. He took a deep breath. "Will I die here?" The sturdy horsewhip in his hand suddenly broke inch by inch. The prince sneered in a low voice, "How can I die here?" Chapter 671. The history books, especially the unofficial history books, like to describe those fierce generals as the enemy of 10,000 people, but no one would take it seriously. However, the saying that the enemy of 1,000 people did exist in the army of the Liang dynasty. Although it was rare, there was a precedent. When the Su family wanted to establish Western Shu for the emperor, except for the king of Western Shu and a large number of officials, they swore to defend the country. They would rather die than surrender to the Liang dynasty, and they would rather die than flee to the imperial city. The Sword Emperor of Western Shu, as a member of the royal family of Western Shu, guarded the city gate with his sword. Unfortunately, after the battle, he was first exhausted and then crushed to death by the Bailiang cavalry. In that battle, the Sword Emperor of Western Shu killed 800 men in 3 hours. After he died, he was trampled by the horses. Then, Chu Lushan put a flag on the corpse. The long chaotic wars of spring and autumn caused the soldiers to gain a lot of experience in fighting against top-class martial artists in the martial world. They had to exhaust their opponents before their morale collapsed and not give them a chance to catch their breath. These precious experiences that were gained by piling up corpses and lives were passed down from the old soldiers to the new soldiers, generation after generation. Wang Ji, as a general of the Sword Garret, was in the south of Western Shu where the Sword Emperor died. Needless to say, Bailiang had Chen Jibao and Yuan Zuozong who survived in the imperial concubine's tomb. They could be said to be worthy of being the enemy of 1,000 people. Naturally, they often used these brilliant figures as imaginary enemies to train the cavalry. However, the fierceness of the red python-robed eunuch and the craftiness of his killing methods still made Wang Ji a little unprepared. Han Diaosi rushed in a straight line, his red python robe fluttering in the wind. Thousands of red threads appeared on his hands, and he could easily take people's heads and cut them into pieces. Except for Wang Ji's Bailiang saber cutting off some of the red threads and a few capable generals who luckily survived, no less than 30 cavalrymen were strangled by this human cat. Fortunately, the cavalry battle formation did not pursue multiple rounds of killing from the beginning. They wanted to be firm. Even if they had to give up a part of the advantage of the cavalry's impact, even if they had to give the 2,000 cavalrymen behind Han Diaosi an innate advantage, they had to try their best to circle around and stop this old eunuch. The secret order Wang Ji received a few days ago was very simple. It only had 2 words: delay. With what? In addition to conserving 1,000 of his cavalry to prevent them from being defeated by the 2,000 people who knew each other well, the 2,000 cavalry that participated in the battle also did not swarm forward like a swarm of bees. Instead, they were divided into 20 cavalry groups of 100 men, striving to advance and retreat with a sense of propriety, so that the advantage of numbers could be fully utilized to the extreme. Wang Ji had already had 3 hurried exchanges with Han Diaosi. The first time, he used his saber to block the enemy, and the other 2 times, he bent down to pick up the spears of his fallen comrades. The last time, he threw his spear back to chase after the red cat and threw it behind him. One of the spears was actually wrapped around the back of the spear as if it had grown eyes, directly twisting the spear into pieces. Wang Ji threw the spear for the 3rd time, directly abandoning the man and killing the horse. The frighteningly red cat unexpectedly reined in the horse and leapt into the air, dodging the flying spear. It even pulled the heads of the surrounding 5 cavalrymen into the air. Wang Ji's eyes were bloodshot as he cursed, "Motherf *Ker, you're not human at all." Behind Wang Ji, there were 8,000 horse hooves stomping on the ground. Wang Ji made a hand gesture, and the 1,000 cavalrymen who were motionless split apart like a flood, bypassing the reef in the middle of the river and rushing towards the 2,000 cavalrymen led by He Yan. In addition, the 6 cavalry groups that were on the periphery could not immediately surround the killer cat to engage in a fierce battle. Wang Ji carelessly rubbed his cheeks, spat out a mouthful of bloody saliva, and said fiercely, "If I don't die this time, no matter what, I will ask the king of Bailiang to be the general of 10,000 cavalrymen." Chen Jibao said that he wanted to kill Su Weisheng and bring her body to Western Shu to proclaim himself as the king. He did not have the slightest intention of showing any mercy, nor was he sloppy at all. Every time the plum wine came into contact with the ancient crimson feather sword, this famous sword would explode with a series of clear and melodious sounds like the roar of a dragon, trembling and melodious. Every time they collided, Su Weisheng, who was holding the sword in her right hand, would violently shake her right sleeve. The profundity of the plum wine was not limited to this. Every time Chen Jibao struck out with his spear, it seemed gentle, without the slightest bit of anger. But every time he shook his sleeve, the elite cavalrymen of the Great Snow Dragon Cavalry would suddenly die for no reason. Clearly, before they could get within 20 steps of the two of them, they died cleanly, as if a spear had pierced through their chests. They did not even have the time to feel the pain before their bodies flew backwards, falling into the yellow sand. Qin Jibao suddenly swung the plum wine, sweeping it out horizontally. The ancient crimson feather sword in Su Weisheng's hand drew a frightening arc that would definitely break an ordinary famous sword. The two cavalrymen behind Su Weisheng and her horse were once again mysteriously killed. Before they fell off their horses, their bodies in the air were exactly the same as the ancient crimson feather sword, drawing an arc in the air. Lightly taking back the plum wine, Qin Jibao pointed at the ground, and the tip of the spear spun out a flower. Looking at the woman who was spitting out blood, he lightly smiled. This is the time when the plum is still young. You really don't plan on extending your left hand? The second sword of Taoism, the ancient crimson feather sword, in the end, is still the word order. Su Weisheng did not make a sound. Qin Jibao turned his head to look at the Iron Gate Pass. I originally wanted to go there and cut down the python and dragon, and then enter Shu alone. This way, no matter who it is acceptable. The plum wine in his hand gradually turned a deep purple. Su Weisheng threw the ancient crimson feather high into the air. High into the clouds, it attracted the heavenly thunder. Su Weisheng was just about to blurt out the word order. A spear pierced through the abdomen. Qin Jibao pulled out the plum wine, drawing a stream of blood from the woman's body. His face was expressionless. Su Weisheng was still trying his best to say the word order. Then, the white-robed man spun to the end of the spear and knocked him off his horse. It seemed like he was showing mercy, but in fact, this plum turning from green to purple was the real killing move. At this moment, a woman was flying south on her sword. Behind the woman was a green-robed Confucian scholar leisurely following. The young woman was extremely beautiful, and the way she rode the sword was like a carefree immortal. She fiercely glared at Su Weisheng, who was her second mortal enemy in her life, and said coldly, "I'm just watching. Don't expect me to make a move." On the other hand, the middle-aged Confucian scholar who had dominated the world chuckled and said, "The plum wine goes best when it's purple." Qiao Chongqing floated over and supported the woman whose soul was swaying unsteadily. He pressed down on her heart meridian, gently inserted a pill, and gently put her down. Only God knew if she was dead or alive. He was just doing his best. In fact, it was still difficult to escape death by forcefully attracting the heavenly tribulation. Death warriors deserved to die. If it wasn't for the fact that he had scouted this place and the yellow sand was thousands of miles long, even the land immortal Qiao Chongqing wouldn't have been able to catch up. Qiao Chongqing stood up and stretched out his hand, asking, "Confucian sage Qin Jibao, can you fight?" This white-robed warrior immortal, who no one in the world knew had quietly entered the Saint Realm, raised the plum wine that was surrounded by a vast purple aura and said calmly, "Please." Chapter 672. The night duty area of the Minister of Governmental Affairs was located on the east side of the palace's Longxing Gate. Below the palace walls was a row of low-tiled houses. Compared to the grandiose style of the Hall of Governmental Affairs' two provinces, it truly seemed extremely shabby. Tonight, the current court's Grand Secretary Zhang Julu was personally on night duty in the palace. Of the three high officials, because West Chu's Grand Tutor Sun Shiji had been transferred out of the capital to become the administrator of West Chu's old territory, the Minister of Governmental Affairs of the three provinces was originally vacant. Out of the three positions, two of them were immediately left empty. This was becoming more and more outrageous, not conforming to the dynasty's etiquette system. Immediately, the influential officials of all levels of society were speculating about who would have the qualifications and luck to replace Sun Shiji and leap up. Gangnamdu's Lu Daolin had just been promoted to the position of Minister of Rights for less than a year, yet the left Chancellor Huan Wen immediately became the big shot that everyone looked up to. In the Minister of Governmental Affairs main hall, apart from the low room in the center with the name Zhang Lu sitting inside, Zhang Julu, Lu Daolin's younger brother Lu Baijie was also in the easternmost short room. This Tang Shi Sword Immortal was the newly appointed Assistant Minister of the Ministry of War, coincidentally also on duty. Even though the Ministry of War was controlled by Gu Jiantang, it had always been impervious to oil and salt, with the other ministers and the 5 ministries having the intention of not interfering with each other's business. Of the 6 ministries and Yamen seals, only the Ministry of War had its own main hall and side room. Towards this, Zhang Jiulu, who was known for being strict in governance, unexpectedly dealt with it without batting an eyelid. It was clear that not only was Great Minister Gu's rank a full rank higher than the 5 ministries' ministers, his real power was without a doubt far greater than the difference of a single rank. However, Liu Baijie, who had just entered the core of the capital's officialdom, didn't mind these things at all. When he occasionally met Grand Secretary Zhang, it wasn't just a greeting of a dragonfly skimming the surface of the water, they would also stop and exchange a few words. Each time, they chatted happily, not the slightest bit perfunctory. Zhang Jiulu was currently flipping through a forbidden book copied from the old Shu, written by a mad scholar. Sun Shiji, who had rushed to Guangling Path to take up a post to appease the clamoring public opinion, actually wrote a letter specifically for this matter, pleading for leniency for that scholar, pleading for leniency. When Zhang Jiulu received that letter during the day, he didn't immediately reply, only asking for a forbidden book from the Imperial Archives, carefully flipping through it. Just as he was reading to the point where his brows were furrowed, the blue-eyed, purple-bearded Grand Secretary heard a burst of bold laughter from outside the main hall. The number of old fellows who dared to cause such a ruckus in the inner court could be counted on one's fingers. Zhang Jiulu put down the forbidden book and glanced at the full moon hanging on the wall outside the window. In the room, several of the influential officials of the 6 ministries subconsciously stopped writing and put down their books, all of them looking at the Grand Secretary. Zhang Jiulu smiled and gestured at everyone, indicating that they should ignore him. Unlike when the previous Grand Secretary was in charge of the minister's desk, although the officials in Zhonglu were all 4th rank and above, they were actually almost a generation younger than before. There were very few gray-haired old men with muddled eyesight. Most of them were around 50 years old, and there was even one in his early 40s who had entered the central government as the assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel. Zhang Jiulu gently stepped over the 2 thresholds and walked out of the main hall that was privately called Zhonglu by the court. He saw the left Chancellor Huan Wen's old face that couldn't be any more familiar. In addition, there was also the Minister of Rights Liu Daolin, who was originally on duty in front of the Imperial Palace's West Qianxi Palace. When a prince left the capital to be conferred a vassal, it was a major event that would affect the entire situation. The Ministry of Rights of the Imperial Clan Court and the Hall of Governmental Affairs had to put in effort in all aspects. There was not the slightest bit of error. However, between Huan Wen and Liu Daolin, there was another man. The most conspicuous thing about him was the yellow dragon robe he wore. Zhang Jiulu quickly stepped forward and was about to bend down to pay his respects when the emperor gently supported his arm. Zhang Jiulu no longer pretended to be humble. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw a young eunuch. He said he was young, but that was only in comparison to the previous eunuch from the ceremony directorate, Han Xingxian. Originally, it should have been Han Diaoxi who accompanied the emperor at his side. Zhang Jiulu, who had never interacted with the eunuchs of the internal court, didn't want to delve too deeply into it. It was enough to know what was going on in his heart. Liu Daolin saw that the 3 of them had no intention of immediately entering the room, so he was the first to take his leave and walked into Zhonglu. The emperor waited until the Minister of Rights entered the room before joking in a warm voice, "My 2 beloved ministers, please come with me to the Ministry of War's main hall for a while. I know where the tea is good. It's the authentic spring spirit lake tea before the rain. Zhang Lu's side isn't good. The tea is also sloppy and can't enter one's mouth." Zhang Jiulu, who didn't pay much attention to the rules when interacting with his subjects in private, smiled and said, "Sure, I don't like shamelessly freeloading wine. Things like freeloading tea, there's no harm in doing it a few times while General Gu isn't here. However, I reckon that Chancellor Huan won't be interested." Huan Wen glared at him and said, "Zhang Baiyan, you've only just seen His Majesty and you're already in a hurry to set me up?" Zhang Jiulu glanced unhappily at Huan Wen, who had his hands behind his back. "Such a strong aroma of wine, do you think I can't smell it? Since His Majesty has rewarded you with good wine, you should obediently shut up and drink your wine later. Don't get drunk and go crazy." Huan Wen, who was exposed by his bad friend, laughed loudly. The emperor of the Zhao family was also in a good mood. He walked with the two pillars of the country to the Ministry of War's East Wing main hall. There was a saying that there was a confrontation with Zhang Lu here. With regards to these harmless disputes, the emperor heard them and dismissed them with a laugh. Even in front of Zhang Julu and Gu Jiantang, he could still casually tease them without any ill feelings. After crossing the threshold, they saw that His Majesty had personally come to the main hall. The officials of the Ministry of War in the outer and inner rooms all rushed out and knelt on the ground. The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of War, Liu Baijie, knelt at the front and his voice was also the most passionate and mellow. The emperor had everyone rise. He had no intention of lecturing them. He only asked them to return to their desks to deal with military affairs. However, he left Liu Baijie behind. The emperor of the Zhao family thought highly of this person. He had repeatedly ordered him to enter the palace to discuss military affairs. He had even asked sword fairy Tang Shi to teach swordsmanship to a few of the imperial grandsons. It could be said that the emperor's kindness was vast and mighty. This allowed Liu Baijie to quickly establish himself in the imperial court in the capital. No one dared to slight him. There was a huge painting of mountains and rivers hanging on the wall of the outer room. The emperor had the three dignitaries sit down and drink tea. He himself stood under the painting and picked up a slender red sandalwood pole. For the time being, he did not point out anything on the painting. Zhang Julu drank a mouthful of the goddess of spring bilyaconch, which had become a tribute tea because of a poem. He whispered to the left chancellor of the Imperial College, who was sitting on the chair next to him, "Drink further away. The aroma of the tea is all washed away." Huan Wen retorted, "The room is only so big and the wine is so fragrant. Where do you want me to go?" After he finished speaking, he asked the attendant in the main hall to ask for an extra cup from the spring kiln. He handed it to the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of War, Liu Baijie, and said with a smile, "Sword fairy Tang Shi, let's drink to our heart's content. It's 2 against 1. If someone has to scram, it should be that blue-eyed guy. Isn't that right?" Liu Baijie, who had the bearing of a scholarly general, took the cup with a smile and said softly, "I'll drink the wine. But if it's not right, Left Chancellor, I really don't dare to say." Zhang Julu laughed angrily, "Each one is more slippery than the other. The Left Chancellor who carries the wind and moon on his shoulders? The sword fairy Tang Shi who is generous and unsophisticated? Why does it change when it comes to me?" Chapter 673. The emperor, who had left his servants and eunuchs outside in the middle of the night, turned around with a smile and asked, "Julu, tell me more about the imperial examinations north and south rankings and the selection of soldiers." "I have read the memorial. Although I can recognize all 60,000 words, there are still many parts one don't understand. Especially the part where the strong medicine will cure the illness, but after 100 years, we will see the shortcomings of the party. That memorial started strong but ended weak. It was not detailed enough, so I want to talk more about it tonight. Chancellor Huan and Assistant Minister Liu, don't be idle. If you have any ideas, speak. Whether it is tea or wine, I will give you all plenty. If you don't give me an explanation before dawn, don't blame me for being stingy. How much tea and wine did you drink? I will charge you according to the market price. Don't think about paying less." Zhang Julu faced Huan Wen and Liu Baijie and smiled, "How is it? Am I being unreasonable or is your Majesty being unreasonable?" The two nodded and smiled, "Your Majesty is even more unreasonable." The emperor laughed heartily. If it were anyone else, they would be praising me for being thrifty and diligent in governing the country. The emperor of Zhao waved his hand to signal for the servants to retreat into the room and close the door. He picked an expensive chair with exquisite workmanship and sat down. However, he still held the sandalwood pole in his hand and placed it on his knees. He received a cup of refreshing tea from Liu Baijie. They talked until dawn, but the 4 of them were still not tired at all. They were still in high spirits. In terms of diligent governance, the Emperor of Zhao could indeed be ranked in the top 3 of all the emperors in history. Although there were still some details that were not mentioned, the emperor still stood up and rubbed his hands and feet. He walked to the giant painting with his back facing the three of them. He drew an arc at the intersection of Bailiang and Western Shu. He asked, "Are they all here?" Zhang Julu said in a low voice, 60,000 cavalry. There are still 20,000 cavalry on the road. The emperor, who was using the wooden pole to point out the country, smiled and said, "There is not much difference between 60,000 and 80,000, unless 60,000 is 600,000. Zhang Julu nodded. The emperor of Zhao threw away the pole and went to the table to grab a porcelain cup that had already turned cold. However, he did not raise it. Perhaps he was not in the mood to drink tea to quench his thirst. Or was he afraid that his subjects would see the details of his trembling when he raised his cup? He looked down at the teacup and asked softly, "Do you?" Zhang Julu calmly shook his head and said, "Don't worry, Your Majesty. They won't fight." When the Zhao family's son heard this clear answer, he smiled and put down the teacup that he had never lifted. He raised his head and said, "You guys should rest early too." After Liu Baijie and the two old officials saw His Majesty out of the main hall, they returned to the room alone and inadvertently looked at the table. There were still some ripples in the cup. No one would believe that a large net had been cast on the border of Bailiang. It could be said that all the old subordinates of the Gu party had come out. 60,000 men and horses had rushed to set up camp in one place under the pretext of redeployment. There were even 20,000 cavalry who had rushed into the border from Jizhou. The momentum was so great that it could not be concealed at all. The 60,000 men and horses that were already in place were led by Kai Nan, a former subordinate of General Gu Jiantang. They had formed a loose defense line on the border that went against the common rules of the art of war. This defense system was like a child's play. Not to mention the cavalry in the north that had shocked the two dynasties, even the ordinary cavalry of the Duke of Guangling and Duke of Yanqi could be destroyed in one go. However, when Kai Nan led hundreds of soldiers to patrol the front line, there were no signs of any changes. The generals and captains in the army were not without doubts. However, when one of them asked and was sternly reprimanded by Kai Nan, no one dared to ask again. Kai Nan rode on his horse and looked to the north. All sorts of feelings welled up in his heart. He muttered to himself, "I just wish I could have 40,000 more men to symbolically place people on the entire border. This way, we can put up a formation that will not allow the Bailiang cavalry to openly enter the border. Otherwise, if a fight really breaks out, how can 60,000 people block it? However, if the Bailiang army dares to charge in, so what if you kill all 60,000 of my men? Openly rebel? I've been waiting for this day." Kai Nan thought this way. However, when he thought about it more deeply, he felt like he was walking on thin ice when he thought about how he had to be an enemy of the general who was much more famous than Minister Gu. A pawn that crossed the river had no choice. Kai Nan knew that he had to suffer. As for why there was such a commotion, Kai Nan only knew that Prince Zhao Kai had gone to the western regions. Could it be that someone in Bailiang wanted to kill this famous prince? Although Kai Nan was a martial artist, he understood the superficial logic of not having a proper status. If Prince Zhao Kai, whose background was unclear, really had such intentions, he would definitely have done so. Moreover, the capital was currently in a crucial period when the princes were being conferred the title of king. If Zhao Kai could really gain power in the western regions, Kai Nan did not need to think to know that he would definitely become a king with real power. If he went to western Shu and became the king of Shu, then that would be interesting. A scout quickly rushed back. His face was pale. After dismounting, he knelt on the ground and said in a trembling voice, "The Bailiang cavalry has arrived. I don't know the exact number, but there are at least 10,000 of them. However, these 10,000 cavalry are the Great Snow Dragon cavalry." Kai Nan's expression was normal. However, the joints of his fingers holding the sword were white. Was 10,000 cavalry soldiers of the king of Bailiang a small number? Kai Nan felt that it was too much. Gritting his teeth, Kai Nan ordered a trusted general behind him, "Pass down the order. Within 100 miles, gather the troops here." Kai Nan looked into the distance. Yellow sand rolled in his field of vision. Kainan's mouth was bitter. He took a deep breath. Which adopted son will be leading the troops? He did not care about being stopped. He insisted on leaving the soldiers behind and charged forward alone. When Kainan was half a mile away, he did not dare to take half a step forward. The endless horsemen stopped their horses solemnly on the vast plain. Kainan could see a royal flag with the word Su flapping in the wind. A rider stepped out of the formation and slowly advanced. Kainan's eyes widened. His breathing, which could be considered steady, suddenly became hurried. The old man was wearing armor and holding a spear. Kainan's mind was blank. He did not know why, but his hands and feet could not help but dismount. He knelt on the ground and shouted respectfully, "This General Kainan pays his respects to the king of Bailiang." The man, horse, and spear approached Kainan. The general gave a light sound of acknowledgement. The warhorse continued to slowly move forward. The sound of its hooves trampled on Kainan's heart. Reining in his horse, the general Su Shao finally put on his armor and spear again. He looked into the distance and asked softly, "Only 60,000 men. Isn't Gu Jiantang being too stingy?" Kainan, who had been kneeling on the ground all this time, could not care about his pride. His face was covered in sand. He did not dare to make a sound. This butcher smiled, "Don't worry. I'm just waiting for someone. I won't kill anyone. As long as you don't interfere, this king has no interest in falling out with anyone." Su Shao smiled, "Let's go, General Kai. Let this king see the glory of the Gu clan's cavalry." On this day, when the king of Bailiang, Su Shao, and his cavalry were about to enter battle, someone dismounted and shouted, "Greetings to the general." The 20,000 cavalry soldiers who had rushed over all knelt. Chapter 674. East of Iron Gate Pass was favorable for cavalry attacks, so it was naturally a good place where it was easy for people to die. 200 light cavalry faced 800 light cavalry. The 200 Imperial Army soldiers didn't cower in the slightest. It was different from a few years ago when the children of influential families from the capital mixed into the imperial family's personal army to earn a living. After Zhang Julu took power, he personally flipped through the imperial army's records. As long as they were the descendants of ministers or high-ranking officers, they would all be expelled from the imperial army in a single day. That day, the military camp was already half empty. Many of the children of generals who relied on their own abilities to enter the army were no exception. This made Zhang Julu extremely unpopular among the capital's officials and generals. When quite a few old generals who had meritorious achievements met, they all began to curse at him. One of the old generals who lived on the same street directly blocked the door, questioning that purple-bearded and blue-eyed man, questioning why with his grandson's strength, he couldn't be an ordinary soldier of the imperial army. Grand Secretary Zhang walked out the door, calmly saying, "Your grandson indeed has the ability, but your great-grandson definitely won't have this ability in the future. This official is only closing this door 20 years in advance." Back then, the old general who still held an important position didn't understand that scholarly and twisted reasoning. Fortunately, he didn't dare roll up his sleeves and use force against the current Grand Secretary, only deciding to never interact with him again. The two families who originally had a harmonious relationship even had a joyous marriage delayed. Only many years later did the old general retire from the Ministry of War's second highest position, and only then did he take the initiative to apologize. The black-clothed youth passed by Feng Battalion's officer Yuan Meng and Blue Bird, facing a middle-aged martial artist who rushed out of the cavalry formation. This imperial bodyguard didn't use a blade. After his arms were grabbed by Su Longxiang's hands, the flesh on his originally thick and solid arms immediately dried up, becoming a ghastly bag of bones. After breaking free from his shackles, he seized the initiative with a flip of his hand, wishing to tear apart the hands of the sallow and skinny youth in front of him. Su Longxiang still allowed him to exert his strength quickly, only kicking out. The middle-aged imperial bodyguard, who had been protecting the imperial prince Zhao Kai all this time, had originally intended to trade a life for a life by tearing off Su Longxiang's arms and forcefully blocking the kick through his chest. However, when his arms suddenly expanded to the size of large bowls, the youth still didn't move an inch. The imperial bodyguard immediately let go, both hands pressing down on the youth's toes, his entire body borrowing the force to soar into the air, avoiding a fatal blow. The man from Jianghu's hidden sex crossed his legs, as if he was climbing a ladder. He was fast, but Su Longxiang's hand was even faster. He grabbed one of the man's ankles, pulling his entire body down, and raised his knee to strike. The man, who had immersed himself in secret manuals after entering the palace, used all his strength to elbow him, but he was still hit in the stomach by the youth's knee. His well-built body floated backwards. Fortunately, the cavalry behind him were skilled in horsemanship and were able to quickly circle around him. The man's 5 fingers were like hooks grabbing the ground, carving out a gully several zhang long on the ground. Only then did he stop retreating, his stomach churning and blood seeping out of the corner of his mouth. The man stood up with a bit of fear in his eyes. Since scholars could sell their talents to the royal family, many of the top boorish men were willing to sell their martial arts to the court. Unlike the Su family in Beiliang, who had no official position or power, as long as one had the ability, they could take a position in the royal palace in the capital. Because of his outstanding martial arts, this golden saber imperial bodyguard, who had been bestowed with a yellow saber by the emperor, was a well-known figure. Once, when he returned home to visit his family, his sect had been suppressed by the governor and the general. When he returned, the world had been turned upside down. The snobbish governor had asked an old scholar to write a plaque and personally sent someone to hang it in the sect. Originally, he had been restricted by the rules of the palace and had not planned on arguing with the governor. After that, he brought a disciple of his sect's martial uncle to the capital and luckily became the second golden saber imperial bodyguard. The middle-aged golden saber imperial bodyguard slowly exhaled and surrounded the black-clothed youth with many of his colleagues. The man thought to himself that even if he died here today, he would not let down the sect. Su Longxiang strode forward in a straight line, his eyes fixed on the woman in the white cassock. Blue Bird was the first to break the formation. The spear in her hand deflected a spear from the enemy's face. With a light shake of her wrist, she used the delaying formula and the curved spear technique to pierce through the back of the valiant rider who had thought that it would be over in one round. The curved spear returned. Blue Bird's spear swept across in an instant and the body of the imperial bodyguard was cut into 2. She didn't continue to fight. After killing one of the cavalry generals, she didn't use it again. Even if the imperial cavalry stopped her for a moment, she only rushed towards the carriage. When the first wave of riders' spears brushed past, more than 30 corpses rolled on the ground. It was like 2 blades cutting into each other's flesh. The 2 wounds continued to tear and expand rapidly. Yuan Meng's spear flipped over an enemy rider. The body of the imperial bodyguard who had a bloody hole in his armor was thrown into the air. The rider who still had the strength to fight turned his body in the air. He wanted to land on the ground and stabilize himself before pulling out his sword to fight again. Unfortunately, before he could land on the ground, his head was chopped off by a white horse rider. Yuan Meng laughed loudly. "Ruthless Hong, this head is yours. When we get back, don't be so stingy. I'll treat you, Field Officer Yuan, to a good meal." The expressionless Hong Shuan muttered softly, "Let me be a deputy field officer and I'll treat you to wine." Chapter 675. Yuan Meng's ears were good. Even in the midst of the battle, he could still hear clearly. He laughed and scolded, "Bullsh*t. You can talk to me about this after you've killed 10 people." The northern cold saber in Hong Shuan's hand twisted and changed into an inverted scallion thrust, bending his waist to dodge the spear. Borrowing the momentum of the warhorse charging forward, the cold saber slid rapidly along the spear shaft, cutting off the enemy rider's arm with one slash, and then the Phoenix Battalion's famed ruthlessness cut off half of his head. The horse was still galloping forward, but the man was already dead. Hong Shuan, who still had one Beiliang saber at his waist, said indifferently, "2." Wang Chong, who was charging forward on his horse, glanced at the white horse protector who had died in front of him and gritted his teeth. Suddenly, a red cloud floated over their heads and fell outside the iron gate. Before one of the royal guards fell to the ground and died, he could vaguely see the Warring States master riding his flying sword in the distance. He cursed weakly as he closed his eyes. F***ck your 18 generations of scholars in the capital. Didn't you all say that the crown prince of Baelyang only knew how to bully women? Su Fengnian had seen the Thunder Pool twice. Outside the martial emperor city, Dong Tai's Thunder Pool sword formation killed the celestial being Zhao Xuansu. The Thunder Pool in the mausoleum of the Yellow Emperor was destroyed by the demon Luo Yang with a flick of her sword. Every success and every defeat. Su Fengnian had his own Thunder Pool with flying swords. He had once told Su Beiji that within a few feet of the Thunder Pool, killing people with flying swords was as easy as pie. At first, the sickly old monk in black did not pay much attention to the young heir of Baelyang's talk of revenge. Yang Taisui was a martial artist, and even a level 2 master of martial arts could make Su Fengnian suffer, not to mention Yang Taisui. But when the heir of Baelyang charged over on horseback, his sword chi poured out in torrents like a broken dam. He was a little surprised. Over the years, Yang Taisui had stayed away from the disputes in the palace and traveled the Jianghu. With his rich shrewdness and experience, he was able to deduce the inside story that was not too far from the truth with just a few scattered words in the Wulin. However, he had expected Su Fengnian, who had the great yellow courtyard that Wang Zhongluo had bestowed upon him, to not have so little inner strength, and his sword chi should not be so ferocious. Yang Taisui gently waved his sleeve again and again. The 12 flying swords bounced back again and again. Su Fengnian stopped his horse about 10 zhang away, his hands pressing down on the spring thunder and spring autumn. He was quiet, not making a sound, not saying a word. This was the power of the Wu family's flying swords with a perfect sword embryo. Where one's mind was, the tip of the sword would be there. Moreover, these 12 flying swords were the condensation of the peach blossom sword god Dong Tai's life's work. Even if he had erased the Rui sword embryo before giving the swords to them, the 12 flying swords themselves had long been smooth and transparent. Return to the sect. The old monk in black smiled and spat out these 2 words. One of his hands formed a palm in front of his chest. With a flick of his sleeve, he drew the 6 flying swords into his sleeve. His large sleeve billowed like a balloon. Of the remaining 6 flying swords, Tai stabbed towards the space between Yang Taisui's eyebrows. The old monk raised his hand and slapped, sticking close to Tai. His body seemed to be moving slowly, but this palm forcefully caught 4 flying swords, including Tai, in the air. The other 2 bamboo horse and peach blossom swords struck the old monk's back one after another. However, the Kasaya was like a stone thrown into a lake, waves rippled behind it. The bamboo horse and peach blossom swords returned without any effect and were caught between the 4 fingers of Yang Taisui's palm. The 12 swords were all in the old monk's sleeve and hand. Yang Taisui looked at the young man sitting still on the horse and said softly, "Your Highness, can you retreat now?" Su Fengnian twitched the corner of his mouth. "It's still early. You're not dead yet." He stretched out his hand and flicked his fingers in the air in front of him. The 6 swords were still imprisoned by the fingers of the old monk in black, but the 6 swords in the sleeves had already broken out of the sleeves. Yang Taisui was surprised and muttered to himself, breaking longevity with a knock of the fingers? Tao was not monopolized by Taoism. The 3 sects had always been searching for their own Tao. And Confucianism was not the same as the Confucianism that Saint Zhang had set down layers of rules and regulations. If it were not for the fact that he owed a favor that he had to repay, Chao Chongqing would have liked to chat with the white-clothed soldier sage about the differences between their Taos. Chao Chongqing had become a Confucian sage thanks to the ruins of the Western Wall, thanks to the princess words that the rise and fall of the people were the suffering of the people, and thanks to the noble spirit of the scholars that remained after the fall of West Chu. He was very curious about how Chen Jibao could skip the celestial phenomenon and become an earth immortal. In fact, with Chen Jibao's extraordinary talent, he had followed the martial arts realm step by step into the celestial phenomenon realm, and then became an earth immortal with the identity of a Confucian sage. Such a Confucian sage who had the saints of the 3 sects and the martial arts path, he was afraid that he could only admit defeat. The current Chen Jibao was in a very mysterious and unprecedented state. He was neither a fake earth immortal, nor was he a transcendent earth immortal like Wang Xianji. What a pity. How good would it be to wait for another 10 years? However, there was one thing that he could be sure of. Chen Jibao's quiet entry into the sage realm had a lot to do with the death of the dragon tree holy monk of the two Zen temples. After a long sigh, Chao Changqing stretched out his hand and grabbed. He replaced Su Weisheng to say the word imperial that he did not have time to say. A purple heavenly thunder was forcefully grabbed down from the 9 heavens. The reason why Chao Changqing was known as the top of the celestial phenomenon realm was naturally because of his great talent. Previously, after Chen Jibao faced Chao Changqing, he gently dismounted and patted the warhorse to let it run away. He looked up at the thunder falling. Suddenly, he stabbed the dark purple plum wine into the ground. Chao Changqing smiled slightly and said the word imperial again, this time with his palm facing down. Law Phenomenon. Chapter 676. Under the new sword master Su Fengnian's breaking longevity, the 6 top-notch flying swords of the Wu family's sword tomb broke through the old monk's summer mustard seed sleeve, pierced through the cage and soared into the sky. Yang Taisui, who was holding on to the remaining 6 swords, gently flipped his palm, as if he was reversing heaven and earth. His childhood sweetheart, spring water, peach blossom, vermilion bird Tai E, could only spin rapidly within 2 feet of his palm. Even though the 6 flying swords were like rainbows, they were still unable to escape for the time being. However, the sickly old monk's kasaya was also cut open by the flying swords, strands of it floating in the air. Yang Taisui flipped his palm again, reducing the distance the flying swords wreaked havoc from 2 feet to 1.5 feet. After a few flips, the 6 flying swords were tightly bound and almost immobile. The old monk in black said indifferently, His Royal Highness originally had the Buddha's embryo Taoist root, a rare talent that is very different from the ordinary outstanding martial artists. Why is he not willing to progress step by step to prove the great way, taking the unconventional path time and time again? In this way, how many times can he withstand squandering? Wudong's old supreme leader Wang Zhonglo painstakingly created the big yellow pond. As long as he carefully watered and widened it, then a small pond would become a vast lake. At that time, the 108 golden lotuses would circulate endlessly, and one chi ocean would sway with 180 golden lotuses. What kind of celestial phenomenon would that be? It is precisely because His Highness did not cherish it and went against heaven's will that the pond has dried up and the golden lotuses have withered, leaving only a single bite and standing alone. His Highness still does not repent and is not willing to turn back. Yang Taisui used the lion's roar and shouted the last 2 words, turn around. Su Fengnian's warhorse was pushed back as if it was hit by a hurricane. In the end, it bent its knees and touched the ground. Su Fengnian floated down from his warhorse and slapped the scabbard of the spring and autumn sword. The scabbard swung in an arc, and the spring and autumn sword left its scabbard. After drawing a large circle in the air, the sword hovered in front of Su Fengnian. Su Fengnian walked in front of the warhorse, and with such a shield, the warhorse quickly raised its knees and steadied itself. After riding for such a long distance, the Fergana steed, which was entirely golden and resplendent, had already developed some sort of mystical connection. Lightly tapping its hooves, it reluctantly turned around and trotted away, turning its head back 3 times with every step. In the distance, Yuan Zuozong, who was riding his horse slowly outside the great circle, put his Baoyang saber back into its sheath. Su Fengnian said coldly, the first 2 sword deities, Li Chungang and Dong Tai, did things like opening mountains. However, the saints of the 3 sects closed their doors and sealed their mountains, fearing karma and karma. Once tainted, it would be like a seed thrown into a stone wall. Sooner or later, it would burst the cliff. The dragon tree monk did not become Buddha because he was unwilling. The abbot of the 2 Zen temples had already achieved perfection, but he cared more about spreading Buddha land and spreading mercy everywhere. Although you, Yang Taisui, have shaved your head and put on a kasaya, you are still a legalist in your bones. What you practice is the art of maneuvering. If you become a Buddha's head, that would be the biggest joke. Yang Taisui smiled and said, it's true that I can't become a Buddha's head and attain the bodhisattva fruit. However, it's not difficult to stop you. By the time Han Xingxian arrived at the Iron Gate Pass, he would be like the mantis stalking the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. If he persisted in going about things the wrong way, disregarding his cultivation base and life, then Northern Liang's Chen Jibao, who had quietly entered the Saint Realm, would arrive, and he would become a slingshot. At that time, it would really be like Huang Longshu's prophecy, working hard for others, working hard for whom? Your Highness is a rare intelligent person. You should know that it's better for Prince Zhao Kai to be the king of Shu than for Chen Jibao to be the second king with a different surname. The reason why Beiliang and Beimang can be a tripartite balance of forces is that there is less internal friction. Once they are separated, it's hard to say. In my eyes, Beiliang's real enemy is Zhao Kai, who will be the king of Shu 10 years later, and Chen Jibao now. Your Highness should know how to choose between the two after weighing the pros and cons. Su Fengnian shook his head and said, "That's not how the abacus works." The old monk in black used Buddhism's great direct knowledge to imprison the bamboo horse, vermilion bird, and the other 5 flying swords. It seemed to be an understatement, but it was definitely not as leisurely as it seemed. The flying swords were buzzing like thunder and lightning in the sky. At this moment, every inch of his palm was filled with killing intent. Yang Taisui was about to speak when Su Fengnian waved his hand and said, "You Buddhists believe in following fate. Although you are my senior, your fate has already been used up in that drinking session. Since that's the case, let's not play around here. Today, we have to end it cleanly." Yang Taisui, whose skinny body could not support the black cassock, said sternly, "Su Fengnian, do you really think I can't kill the evil demon?" Su Fengnian laughed and said, "Back then, didn't the imperial astronomer also use the words evil demon to describe me before I was born?" After saying that, Su Fengnian took 2 steps forward and used the spring and autumn sword as the core of the thunder pool sword formation. He put 2 fingers together and wiped the blade of the sword. The spring and autumn sword penetrated the yellow sand on the ground. Su Fengnian recited silently, "I use the spring and autumn sword to break the spring and autumn sword." Yang Taisui said angrily, "How dare you?" This lad was so preposterous that he wanted to use his own fate to steal the secrets of heaven through this famous sword. This was where the real interception came from. Su Fengnian's body, which only people like Tao Manwu who had exceptional insight could see the purplish gold aura in the yellow, suddenly rose up and floated in the 9 heavens. The old monk in black flipped his palm, but he still could not control the 6 flying swords of the bamboo horse. The latter all left his hands and skimmed along the ground before stopping 10 feet above the yellow sand. The 6 flying swords, which had long been eager to take action in the sky, revealed themselves and formed a Big Dipper sword formation with the spring and autumn sword on the ground. Chapter 677. The 12 flying swords and the spring and autumn sword formed a yin-yang 2-form sword formation. The 12 swords formed a thunder pool sword formation. With the mysterious knowledge taught by Hong Shixiang, the young Wudang martial uncle, the swords formed a perfect circle. Yuan Zuozong patted his horse and retreated. This battle had nothing to do with him. After hesitating for a moment, Yuan Zuozong was stunned. He glanced at Su Fengnian and then began to gallop. After passing through the battlefield full of corpses, he grabbed a long spear and went straight to the white-clothed female bodhisattva. As Yuan Zuozong advanced, the red-robed otherworldly item retreated. Yang Taisui looked at the sky and shook his head with a smile. "That's a big move. But the kid of Su family, do you really think I'm a vegetarian?" The old monk in black stomped the ground. His feet didn't even touch the ground and didn't even raise the yellow sand. He shouted, "100 feet of mercy." Yang Taisui broke the jade buckle on his chest and took off the black cassock. He twisted his finger and the cassock flew up to the sky like a black cloud above the old monk's head. It was like a canopy rising from the ground. The ancient book once said that there was a treasure tree planted by immortals in Zhongnan Mountain. It towered hundreds of feet into the clouds without branches or leaves. This should be one of Yang Taisui's secret methods to fight against the heavenly punishment after he was 100 years old. Which of the top playboys in the world didn't have great opportunities and trump cards? After the cassock rose to the sky, it rolled up hundreds of feet of black clouds and shrouded the sky above Iron Gate Pass. Yang Taisui glanced at the handsome young man in the distance. Even this sickly old monk, who had once held the highest position in the world and had retreated bravely, could not help but have mixed feelings for a moment. He had really underestimated him. Being born in a rich family could wear down the spirit of the younger generation. Most of them were born because of this. In the past, Su Shao conquered the 6 countries. His achievements were unparalleled. This was the first dead knot. That woman was pregnant with Su Fengnian. She entered the palace in white and became an immortal on earth. She became a sword immortal overnight. This was another dead knot. Su Fengnian did not want to be a hedonistic son of rich parents. This was another dead knot. Su Fengnian had been restraining himself for 20 years. Now that he had achieved great success in his martial arts practice, the hostility and resentment in his heart had tightened the knot that had never been untied. Yang Taisui slowly closed his eyes and put his palms together. A dead knot can only be resolved with death. But today, Su Fengnian has to die first. Amitabha. Su Fengnian allowed the heavens and earth to absorb his luck. Blood slowly flowed out from his 7 orifices. Since Su Fengnian started practicing saber martial arts, and later on, he even raised his sword. How many fights and dangers had he experienced? Perhaps even he himself couldn't remember it clearly. His sword chi had once rolled over the dragon wall. He had once shaken Kunlun alone. He had once guarded the city gate with his sword. He had once killed Ji Xian with a single slash. Between heaven and earth, several sword formations and the black clouds of Kasaya were sliced apart layer by layer, constantly squeezing. Whether it was Liyang or Beimang, the winter thunder that came early in the morning outside the Iron Gate was the most shocking. Yang Taisui did not care about the soul-stirring phenomenon above his head. He forcibly took a step forward in the thunder pool sword formation of sword chi. This step was 20 feet away. As he stepped on the ground, heaven and earth shook, causing the black rocks on the cliff of the Iron Gate that were as hard as iron to peel off and roll away. The distance of the second step was reduced, but it was still 1.5 feet away. He took 6 steps in a row, each step leaving a Buddha lotus mark on the ground. The old monk in black looked at the young man who was only an arm's length away with pity. These 6 steps plus the previous stomp were the true supreme Buddhist supernatural power of 7 steps blooming lotus. Inside the sword formation, other than the obvious 6 huge lotus flowers, there were also countless small lotus flowers that appeared out of thin air on the ground. It was like a fairy scattering flowers all over the sky, but also like the blessing of 500 arhats. The huge sword formation shook. This part of heaven and earth was like a heavenly deity shaking a huge bucket, rippling without end. The 7th lotus of the 7th step bloomed under the feet of Su Fengnian, who was at the edge of the sword formation. Su Fengnian's face was yellow and gold, and he looked a little dispirited. However, the old monk still persisted and sent out a palm, passing through the thunder pool sword formation. He did not care that a flying sword that was guarding this part of the formation cut his skin and pushed his palm towards Su Fengnian's chest. No one noticed that a red robe had made a huge arc path and floated behind Su Fengnian, who was flying backward. The 2 bodies shuttled past each other without any delay. It was as if the 2 celestial beings had left their bodies and were wandering between heaven and earth. Su Fengnian grinned. The purple gold flower bud in his body suddenly bloomed, then withered and fell into the waterless pond. Spring thunder saber in his left hand. He painstakingly built the thunder pool sword formation. He was just waiting for this moment to be broken by his saber. Ever since he became the rich bait of the red robe otherworldly item, he had been waiting for this moment to feed back. After losing his big yellow room, it was like sweeping the house and welcoming guests. Only when the house was clean and the small temple could sit the big Bodhisattva Danning. In the space of an arm, Su Fengnian opened the gate of heaven with his saber. He slowly brushed past the motionless old monk in black. The thunder pool was destroyed. The Kasaya floated down. The Danning floating in front of Yang Taisui opened his mouth and inhaled. The 2 pairs of golden eyes that were originally impure became clearer. 2 arms grew under his armpits. Su Fengnian covered his mouth with his hand. Blood flowed between his fingers as he slowly walked forward. First, it was the fake mysterious finger. Then, to make things worse, he borrowed strength to achieve the fake celestial phenomenon. In this life, unless he stepped on dog shit and directly became an earth immortal, he could forget about becoming a peak master. Su Fengnian looked at Zhao Kai, who staggered back into the carriage. Everything would be worth it if I kill you and then kill Chen Jibao, who wanted to benefit from it. Chapter 678. Su Fengnian, who was staggering, wished that Chen Jibao could appear in front of him right now. The pseudo-celestial phenomenon that he had obtained from using all of his luck and otherworldly item danning would not last long. His body was like a flood breaking through a dam. What flowed away was not only the cultivation that he obtained from the danning, but also the enlightenment and blessings that came with reaching the celestial phenomenon state. This was not like borrowing money. It would not be difficult to borrow money again after paying it back. Su Fengnian had placed his hopes on God. Next time, if he wanted to use an otherworldly item to deceive others, it would be as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Unless he was determined to destroy himself, the prerequisite was that he would be willing to lend the otherworldly item that had reached the celestial phenomenon state. At that time, the otherworldly item would have resonated with heaven and earth, and Su Fengnian would definitely die. The wealth that he had earned could be counted on one hand. Now that he casually counted it with his fingers, Su Fengnian seemed to have nothing left. He went to Beimang and buried 2 heads. One was buried by the Ruoshui River, and the other was given to his second sister, Su Weisheng. All his efforts were for naught. Even if he could leave Iron Gate Pass alive, his dream of becoming a hero since he was young would become a fool's ravings. However, since he was here, young Taisui and Zhao Kai must die in the Battle of Iron Gate Pass. As long as Chen Jibao appeared and wanted to do something like killing the dragon python, he must die. Yang Taisui had already said that death was the solution to a dead knot. If they did not die, only Su Fengnian would die. What would be destroyed would be the foundation of Bailiang. Any hesitation or compassion was tantamount to stabbing oneself in the heart. The identity of the heir of Bailiang was predestined. Su Fengnian could not escape even if he wanted to. However, the king of Bailiang was not something that Su Fengnian could easily obtain. This seemingly unreasonable logic, Su Fengnian and Su Shao, this pair of father and son, understood in their hearts. Every family had its own difficulties. Moreover, there were many people who kept adding fuel to the fire, making this even more difficult to learn. Su Fengnian did not walk fast. He seized the time to grasp the knowledge and experience. When he arrived at the battlefield between the White Horse Army and the Imperial Cavalry, there was a light cavalryman of the Phoenix Battalion who died in battle. He died with his eyes open. Obviously, he had dismounted and fought the enemy's cavalry. His arm holding the Bailiang saber was trampled on his chest. Su Fengnian squatted down and stroked his eyelids. He looked up and saw that not many of the 200 Imperial Guards were left. On the battlefield, the more powerful the general was, the faster he would die once he fell into a quagmire. The Golden Saber Guards were all dead. Not a single one was left. Half of the White Horse Army were still fighting on horseback. The other half had been fighting on foot for a long time. The 6-jewel Bodhisattva was entangled by Huang Manor and Blue Bird. The Talisman General was held back by Yuan Zuozong with a long spear. Prince Zhao Kai, who was sitting on the coachman's seat dejectedly, was not sure if he was waiting for Han Diaosi to come and save the situation or if he was waiting for death. More than 10 heavily injured Imperial Guards swore to protect the front of the carriage. Previously, the rolling black clouds could not cover the Thunder Pool sword formation. Many people saw with their own eyes the scene of the old monk in black, Yang Taisui, being killed. Since ancient times, heroes were judged by their success or failure. Without his cassock, the state preceptor became a piece of dead wood, while Su Fengnian came out alive. It was obvious what would happen to Prince Zhao Kai this time when he went to the western regions with a bottle. Su Fengnian did not lower his guard. The sword garret was moving. Wang Ji's 3,000 cavalry was against Han Diaosi, who was supported by He Yan's 2,000 cavalry. They might not be able to stop Han Xingxian, who had bet all on Zhao Kai. Logically speaking, it was time for him to show up. However, Su Fengnian, who had the spring thunder saber at his waist, looked at the endless yellow sand in the north. Was Chen Jibao waiting for the next fight between the snipe and the clam? That was right. His patience had always been so good that it made people's hair stand on end. Zhao Kai stood up and looked at the approaching Prince of Bailiang. He asked calmly, Su Fengnian, do you really dare to kill me? Does Bailiang really want to rebel? Su Fengnian did not pay attention to this prince who had participated in the assassination at the Reed Marsh in Xiangfan City. He just looked at the female bodhisattva who was fighting Huang Man, at the entrance of the valley. Zhao Kai can give you a silver bottle that symbolizes the Liang dynasty. I'm not the son of the Zhao family, so I can't do it. But I can lend you 100,000 cavalrymen of Bailiang. You help me pacify the western regions, and I can leave 20,000 soldiers and horses to guard the north and south of Tian Shan. Do you want to do this deal? Of course, you have to pay me a deposit to kill Zhao Kai. I can't bear the label of rebellion. The western regions are in turmoil and chaos, and a large number of wandering monk soldiers have appeared to kill the prince. That's why I have a reason to lend you the soldiers. You want the western regions to be free, so I'll give you this freedom. Zhao Kai's expression was uncertain. Yuan Meng tore off a strip of cloth from his inner robe and wrapped it around the knife wound on his arm. He grinned sinisterly. This was His Royal Highness, who could make King of Jing'an, Zhao Heng, suffer in silence. The ruthless Hong Shuwen, who was covered in blood, remained on the horse's back. He held 2 Bailiang sabers in his hands and gently patted the horse's belly. The six-pearl bodhisattva did not bat an eyelid. She sent Huang Man, flying again and again. More than half of the Iron Gate Pass had already collapsed. Every time Huang Man retreated, Qing Miao's instant arc spear would follow, not leaving the slightest gap. Chapter 679. Su Fengnian walked towards the entrance of the valley. Behind him, a red cloud floated. He turned around and saw the otherworldly item dragging a small and withered corpse. The otherworldly item landed behind Su Fengnian. It was happy but not happy. It looked even more solemn. Su Fengnian patted its head and pointed at the cliff. The otherworldly item tilted its head and flew towards the cliff of Iron Gate Pass. It stepped on a big hole and placed Yang Taisui's corpse into it. A master of Taoism was buried on a wild cliff. Su Fengnian waved his hand and signaled Huang Manor and Blue Bird to stop. The otherworldly item circled around the mountain peak and landed on the narrow road behind the entrance of the valley, blocking the escape route of the Tantric Dharma King. Su Fengnian looked at the Buddhist mirror in the woman's hand. It was like a small world. He smiled and said, I don't know when Chen Jibao will come. Are you waiting for him too? If my crow's beak is right, we don't need to talk nonsense. The bodhisattva frowned her charming eyebrows. They looked at each other and their eyebrows gradually relaxed. Su Fengnian felt relieved. He said suspiciously, don't destroy the talisman armor. I have a use for it. Above her palm, the sand gathered to form a star. 9 sandballs had been revolving mysteriously like the stars in the sky. At this moment, the star collapsed and countless yellow sand drifted away between her fingers. The bodhisattva didn't say a word. She just walked towards Zhao Kai, who was much luckier than Su Fengnian. As she walked, the bodhisattva lowered her eyebrows and pondered. Even with her innate skill in Taoism, she couldn't figure out why Zhao Kai was defeated. In the eyes of the common people, the saying of climbing up the social ladder was a common view of seeking benefits. However, when one reached her level, it was infinitely more magnificent. Just like Hong Shixiang's sword-cutting fate, even if a normal martial artist had reached the finger Xian state, he would not be able to see any clues. However, the people of the 3 sects, especially the qi cultivators who were proficient in qi observation, could see the pillars of qi collapsing one by one. Similarly, the people of the 3 sects attached themselves to the imperial court and each had their own motives. Take Mount Longhu's great heavenly master Zhao Danping for example. She had stayed by the emperor's side all these years and bore the infamy of Prime Minister Qingxi. In fact, she had benefited greatly. Since there were experts in Taoism who could return to simplicity, there was only one of them. There were also people who found loopholes and filled in the gaps, using countless ones to form a square and circle. Even she couldn't explain the mysteries behind this. Since she was able to discuss Buddhism and longevity with the white-robed monk Li Dangxin on the devil-slaying platform of Mount Longhu, she naturally had her own unique views. Su Fengnian used an external force to steal the heavenly secret and killed Yang Taisui at the cost of his lifetime martial arts. In her opinion, it was reasonable but not reasonable. Not everyone had the qualifications to participate in this assassination. A chessboard, in the end, only had those positions. It was impossible for the two sides to slowly arrange 361 chess pieces. Bailiang and Liang were playing in the western regions. The butcher Su Xiao wouldn't personally enter the Iron Gate Pass area, and the emperor of the Zhao family was the same. Originally, on the chessboard, Su Fengnian and Zhao Kai both had a 50% chance of winning. However, some people didn't intend to watch the game silently. In the eyes of the Red Sex Dharma King, these people happened to be people who had the potential to become immortals on Earth in the future. They completely disrupted the game. One of them blocked Han Diaoxi. Two of them stopped 100 miles north of the Iron Gate Pass. She didn't plan to die in this game of chess. Since Su Fengnian gave her a way out and allowed her to choose herself out of this game of death, even if she really wanted to kill the young man in one fell swoop, she had to suppress that thought and go with the flow. The white-clothed bodhisattva walked in front of Zhao Kai and the golden armor talisman general. Zhao Kai wasn't too flustered and exasperated. He just lowered his head and muttered to himself, "How could this be? Second master is dead, but I still have great master. I shouldn't die here. I should be the emperor." The ambitious prince's face was covered in tears, and he was sobbing. He raised his head and asked in a choked voice, "It shouldn't be like this, right?" The white-clothed bodhisattva was silent. Zhao Kai smiled sadly and wiped his tears. He gently waved his hand and asked the golden armor talisman general to walk to the side of the carriage. He took the giant sword from the talisman general's hand and slit his neck. Before he died, he looked at the capital in a daze. His last words were only one word: "Father." As soon as Zhao Kai died, the golden armor talisman general, which was connected to its master's qi, lost all its vitality. Su Fengnian had the white horse righteous Zong take the corpses and weapons of his fallen comrades and leave Iron Gate Pass. The golden armor talisman general was dragged by Huang Manor with one hand. The next step was to head north. Han Diaoxi couldn't decide the direction of the situation. Even if he killed his way through the encirclement of Wang Zhi's 3,000 cavalry and arrived in front of Su Fengnian, it would be futile. Just as Su Fengnian had said to the female bodhisattva, this assassination attempt would be framed on the entrenched power of the western regions. Once the news spread to the capital and the court, no one would believe it except for the common people. But what could he do? Su Fengnian wasn't afraid of the emperor's wrath. What he was afraid of was that this assassination attempt was still within the man's expectations. If Zhao Kai was just a pawn that could be reluctantly abandoned, who would be the enemy that Su Fengnian would have to face? Was it a prince who had been hiding his strength all this while? To the east of Iron Gate Pass, Han Diaoxi was running alone in the desert. He was blocked by a white fox wearing an embroidered winter ornament. To the north, the Confucian sage Chao Chongqing and the plum wine Chen Zhibao were still confronting each other. Su Fengnian suddenly looked back at Iron Gate Pass. Near the carriage, the uneasy female bodhisattva had a head full of black hair. Chapter 680. The next chapter starts at 3:00 in the morning. Su Beiji had said in the Taming Horse Temple that the layman was afraid of the fruit, and the bodhisattva was afraid of the cause. Su Fengnian had also said to Yang Taisui that the state of mind had fallen. It was like a grass seed growing in the crack of a mountain. It was like a crack in a round mirror. It would get worse and worse, and it would be very difficult for the mirror to recover. The words of the two Zus had come true in both languages. Su Fengnian withdrew his sight and did not look at the six-jewel master with long black hair. The 800 white horse warriors had been carefully selected. Before the attack, they had removed the Baoyang army's mark. At this time, they did not have to worry about being caught. Even if there was a master following the vine to find the melon, Su Fengnian could be said to be framed by the western region's monk soldiers. The key to deciding the direction of the quarrel was not morality or the truth, but the strength of the soldiers behind the chess players. Su Fengnian took the silver bottle from the brocade box in the carriage from Blue Bird's hand and smiled faintly. Yuan Zuozong held his spear and rode half a horse behind Su Fengnian with a dignified face. According to common sense, His Royal Highness who had killed the old monk Yang Taisui alone should be in low spirits. It was expected that he would be in a coma. However, Su Fengnian was riding his horse. He was in high spirits and did not look tired at all. Instead, his aura was at its peak. Especially the spring and autumn sword that was forged with the spring and autumn spirit as the Xian embryo. The sword aura was soaring into the sky. Although it was not out of the scabbard, there were still faint dragon roars like 9 evil dragons overturning the sea. Yuan Zuozong sighed in his heart. It was a tragic victory. Moreover, there were still many undercurrents hidden under the water. Yang Taisui had died in the battle, and Prince Zhao Kai had committed suicide. In this way, the relationship between Baoyang and the imperial court had been completely wiped out. Yuan Zuozong smiled and looked at Su Fengnian's back. Next time, if there was a war, it would be him leading the old Baoyang soldiers to conquer the world. Thousands of miles of yellow sand. After a long time, it was a boring scene. However, in everyone's eyes, it was desolate and shocking. It was truly a scene of heaven and earth. Within a radius of 30 miles, there were countless different-sized gullies. There was no clouds day's time, and the thunders gradually subsiding. Fortunately, His Royal Highness's Thunder Pool sword formation was used to kill the old monk's attack. So many people, was clock 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 clocks clock 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 clock. With the help of Su Fengnian, Yuan Zuozong, and Su Longxiang, the 6-armed otherworldly item, and the Green Bird, this cavalry troop that could only be described as invincible finally arrived at the edge of a bottomless, 20-zhang-wide chasm. A middle-aged Confucian in a green robe was standing there with his hands clasped behind his back. His sideburns were white, and he looked very handsome. The Confucian sage, who became an immortal in the West Wall, laughed loudly. "Let's go." Su Fengnian raised his arms. Except for the Daning, the otherworldly item's new arms, the others followed Yuan Zuozong's lead and went around the gully. Su Fengnian threw the bottle, which was supposed to be priceless but could only be sold by its weight, to the otherworldly item. The otherworldly item held the silver bottle in one hand and jumped over with both arms. It had many hands. It was said that 2 fists couldn't fight against 4 hands. Facing a 6-armed otherworldly item, no one would have the confidence to win. Even Chao Chongqing, who had read thousands of books and traveled thousands of miles, couldn't help but take a few more glances. Chao Qingyi saw Su Fengnian's eyes wandering. He smiled and said, "Your second sister, Su Weisheng, was seriously injured. She was sent to Baoyang Palace by the princess. As for Chen Jibao, who we don't know, he went to Western Shu alone. I believe everyone in Liyang will soon know that there is a second prince with a different surname. However, he is lower than the prince of the 6 great vassal kings. He is only the prince of Shu." Su Fengnian nodded. Chao Chongqing sighed. He walked forward and flicked Su Fengnian's forehead. "Your pseudo-mysterious finger can cut off your immortality. It can cut off other people's immortality, but it can also cut off your own immortality. Do you really want to die in front of Su Weisheng with your reckless final burst of consciousness?" Su Fengnian's imposing manner, which he had been trying his best to maintain, immediately collapsed after the flick of his finger. His handsome face became distorted and ferocious. Chao Zhangqing smiled at the otherworldly item and said, "I'll have to trouble you to press down on his heart meridian. Don't stop until we reach the northern Yang mansion. I will teach you a chant later. Help him guide his qi down to the Kunlun Mountains slowly. Don't let go." After the two-faced otherworldly item heard him, it gently stretched out one arm and pressed Su Fengnian's heart. Su Fengnian said sadly, "My sister?" Qiao Changqing said calmly, "Her chest was pierced by Chen Jibao. Her life is hanging by a thread because of the plum wine. If she wants to live, it depends on her natural desire to live." Su Fengnian spat out a mouthful of dark purple blood and fell backward. Fortunately, the otherworldly item caught him. Qiao Changqing was not surprised. Instead, he was happy. He smiled and said, "It's good that you spat it out. Don't worry. As long as you don't die, Su Weisheng won't die. It's said that everything in the world will complain if there's injustice. Scholars like me will write poems if there's injustice. In the end, the way to immortality is to not have too much evil in one's heart. You've endured for too many years. Do you know why Senior Li Chungang always said that your talent is not as good as the princess? The princess is naturally more transparent than you. Of course, it's also because she's a woman." Su Fengnian's vision was blurry. He could vaguely see Qiao Qingyi's tattered clothes and bloodstains on her body. He endured the piercing pain and gritted his teeth. Is Chen Jibao the king of Shu a last-minute plan by the Zhao family's emperor? As long as I dare to kill Zhao Kai, he will let Chen Jibao go to Western Shu to be crowned the king? Or did he make a promise with Chen Jibao? Chapter 681. Qiao Changqing knocked on the ground again to prolong his life. His qi slowly went down to Kunlun. Su Fengnian's feet suddenly bled like a fountain, soaking the yellow sand. He slowly said, "Zhao Kai is a chess piece, but he wasn't the one who lured you into the trap. That emperor doesn't have the courage to stake everything on one throw. Unless it's Zhao Kai's grandfather, it's more likely. He's just a little bit inferior. Most masters of defense are like that. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to sit on the dragon throne. Zhao Kai is a piece that you want to use to slay the dragon in the future, but it's not like you can't give him up. It all depends on how Beiliang deals with it. Without this assassination, Zhao Kai would have had 10 years to establish a firm foothold in Western Shu and Western regions and cut off Beiliang's escape route. With enough capital, Zhao Kai might have been able to ascend the dragon throne. However, if someone blocked Zhao Kai in Western regions, especially you, the capital would have had a backup plan. Because Chen Jibao would have had to go out. As long as you could rise, he wouldn't have had a reason to stay in Beiliang. Chen Jibao and your father are the same kind of people. Deep down, they still care about each other. That year, when the old emperor forced Su Shao, the general didn't rebel. That's why. As long as one side didn't die of old age, they wouldn't cross the bottom line and rebel. This kind of thing has nothing to do with right or wrong. People live on one breath. Without this breath, they won't be able to achieve great things. I, Qiao Changqing, am no exception. Su Fengnian, if you don't feel like you don't have the bearing of a master, let's sit down and talk. Su Fengnian smiled and nodded. However, his smile was uglier than crying. The otherworldly item helped him sit down cross-legged. Qiao Changqing also sat down calmly. Qiao Changqing smiled and asked, "Not only your assassination, but also the general situation in Liyang and Beiliang. In this game of Go, it's already not easy for you to see 70 to 80% of it. If I had told you earlier that the 3-inch Teng Huang Longsher who killed 3 million people and the #1 strategist of the spring and autumn period were involved, would you have charged headfirst into the Iron Gate?" Su Fengnian nodded without hesitation. Qiao Changqing didn't find it strange. He looked at the gap drawn by the plum wine and sighed softly. "To be honest, Chen Jibao almost made me lose half of my cultivation here. If we fight to the death without any worries, I can live and he will die, but all of my cultivation will be destroyed. At that time, I will really be a useless scholar without the strength to truss a chicken." Su Fengnian was heavily injured, so his speech was unclear. I wouldn't be surprised if he became an earth immortal. Qiao Changqing was surprised and asked curiously with a smile, "You think so highly of Chen Jibao?" Su Fengnian put his hands on his knees and said calmly, "Chen Jibao thinks of me as a bag of grass, but I think of Chen Jibao as invincible in both civil and martial arts. Qiao Changqing shook his head and said, Chen Jibao thinks highly of you more than anyone else. Before he left, he had said that sooner or later, he would fight with you fair and square. Chen Jibao also said this sentence. He has also been holding it in for 20 years. Su Fengnian said bitterly, should I be happy? Qiao Changqing was happy that this kid was defeated. He laughed happily and restrained his smile. The matter of destroying Buddhism in 2 dynasties caused the death of the dragon tree monk. Chen Jibao took advantage of this Buddhist saint's death. Otherwise, he wouldn't have become a saint so quickly. Su Fengnian smiled from the bottom of his heart and said, Su Xiao doesn't like to talk about big principles, but there is one sentence that I remember very clearly. You have to eat your own bitterness and enjoy your own happiness, but you also have to look up to others. So I always think that there are so many good things in the world, but I can't hold them all in my hands. This is not realistic. There are so many beauties, but you can only marry a few. Isn't that right, Uncle Qiao? Qiao Changqing's eyes were happy, but he flicked his finger, don't call me Uncle Qiao. Our friendship is not that good. Su Fengnian nodded and said, that's true. Otherwise, you wouldn't have let Chen Jibao go to Western Shu. After all, you and I have a faint relationship. It's already very kind of you to prevent Chen Jibao from going to the Iron Gate Pass. Chen Jibao went to Western Shu because of the shady business in the capital where he killed 1,000 enemies and lost 800 of his own men. He planted a seed of disaster for Beiliang. Liang is not much better. Since you want to restore West Shu's destiny, this is a very good thing. Qiao Changqing smiled and didn't deny it. I don't want him to take control of Beiliang, but I want Chen Jibao to go to West Shu and proclaim himself king. Because if West Shu wants to restore its country, it can only pull chestnuts out of the fire and profit from the chaos. The more chaotic the chess game, the better. Beiliang, where you are, is far from enough. Su Fengnian clicked his tongue and said, I'm scared of you scholars. Qiao Changqing hesitated for a moment, but still said, Su Fengnian, there's something I still want to remind you of. You have to be the king of Beiliang and the heir apparent of Beiliang. In the past, you've taken the unconventional path and won by surprise troops time and time again. But in the future, you still have to use both right and strange tactics. Just like this ambush where you pull one hair and affect the whole situation. In the end, there are many things that not only the son of the Zhao clan, but also the old foxes of the Liang dynasty like Zhang Julu and Gu Jiantang are well aware of. It's just that under Li Shan's instructions, Su Xiao has taken the path of overt scheming these past few years. He can't be criticized, and that's why Beiliang has the foundation it has today. Don't let down the expectations of the older generation of Beiliang. Zhao Kai didn't lose in terms of luck this time, but because he wanted to use the small to fight against the big, and seek great riches and honor in the midst of danger. But he forgot one thing. He's a prince and has to fight for the throne. But in times of peace and prosperity, the sons and grandsons of the dragon clan who are approaching the throne step by step all emphasize on keeping a low profile. In the capital, the first prince has shown his power and the fourth prince has hidden his power. You have to be careful. Su Fengnian slightly bowed with his hands folded in front of his chest. I sincerely appreciate your advice. Qiao Changqing gently waved his sleeves and folded them on his knees. To be honest, I didn't like you before. I thought you were fickle and sentimental. But now that I've seen some things with my own eyes, I think you're a better person. Last time, when I went to Beimang, I passed by Beiliang and had a secret meeting with the great general. This time, I acted according to the agreement and stopped Chen Jibao. It can be considered that I've paid off the old debt that West Chu owes to the Su family. From now on, we don't owe each other anything. If it's time to kill you, I won't hesitate to do it. Su Fengnian smiled. Aren't you afraid that your princess will scold you? Qiao Changqing was stunned. He bent his finger and flicked Su Fengnian's forehead, making the latter take a deep breath. The otherworldly item's joyful face smiled knowingly. Su Fengnian muttered to himself, it's almost winter. She's going to get frostbite again. Qiao Changqing was speechless. He smiled and said, "That's right. She's going to make a scarecrow and scold you again." The otherworldly item helped Su Fengnian get up. "I'm in a hurry to go back to see my sister. I'm sure the princess doesn't want to see me. Uncle Chow, should we part ways or walk together?" Chow Chongqing stood up and brushed away the dust. "Let's go our separate ways. Don't try to worm your way into being friends with me." Su Fengnian let the otherworldly item float onto the horse's back. He cupped his hands and bid farewell to the Confucian sage Chao Qingyi. He left them in the dust. Chao Chongqing stood in place. This time, Su Shao appeared at the border wearing a general's armor instead of Prince Liang's boa robe. Therefore, Chao Chongqing watched as the young king of Bailiang left. Chapter 682. After that, Huang Longshi. The whole Liang dynasty liked to use this saying to ridicule someone's hindsight. Of course, hindsight also came from Huang Longshi's original creation of Xiangqi. Xiangqi replaced Xiangqi, which was also known as Xiangqi, and became second only to Xiangqi. In a small tea house in Beimang, the featherless parrot still liked to call everyone it met Grandpa. The shopkeeper of the tea house with the surname Huang was still so unmotivated. The young girl who raised a big cat did not give a good face to the customers. In addition, the business of the tavern was so cold and bleak that it was like a graveyard. This made Wen Hua, who had never been able to earn money to go to the brothel to pretend to be a romantic, very depressed. Today, there was a wooden sign outside the tea house saying that it was closed. After Wen Hua walked into the tavern with the birdcage, he never treated his internal organs badly. He made a bowl of fragrant onion noodles and buried his head in it. The manager, old Huang, took out 3 wooden boxes from somewhere and put them full of chess pieces. 2 boxes of black and white chess pieces, and 1 box of colorful glazed chess pieces. He cleared the table and placed them there, constantly placing and collecting chess pieces. Seeing this, Wen Hua was furious. Pretending to be a ghost, if you have the ability to learn from Su Fengnian, set up a stall to gamble and earn copper coins. Behind closed doors, pretending to be a chess sage, chess master, and chess immortal. What kind of hero is he? After eating the onion noodles, he was thinking about whether to secretly go to the kitchen to reward himself with another bowl. However, thinking that he couldn't make ends meet, he really didn't have the face to take advantage of her. Wen Hua didn't waste it at all. He licked the big white porcelain bowl clean and sighed at the empty bowl. Bored to death, he could only carry his bowl and chopsticks over to old man Huang's side to sit. Miss Jia, who would laugh at a customer whenever she was unhappy, was carrying a sunflower. Her legs rested on the bench as she stared blankly. Wen Hua did not have the guts to sit on the same bench as her, so he asked old man Huang to move slightly so that he could rest his buttocks next to Huang Longshi. Wen Hua looked at the black and white confrontation on the table, mixed with many colorful glazed chess pieces. Wen Hua wanted to touch one of them to see if it was valuable. If it was only right to steal a few and pawn them. How long had it been since he was paid? Not to mention the red packets during festivals. Unfortunately, his claws were slapped away by Huang Longshi, and Wen Hua casually placed the bowl and chopsticks at the corner of the table before he said with a smile, "Old Huang, what are you doing? Tell me about it." Huang Longshi immediately held a box of glazed beads in one hand while his fingers moved slightly with his other hand, and he held his breath with rapt attention while ignoring Wen Hua's clamor. Wen Hua felt bored and could only turn his head to look at the young girl who liked to chuckle. The Jia family's Jia family is raising the price to fake Jia. Let me make things clear to you. That big cat is a glutton. We can't afford to raise it. The delicate and pretty young girl chuckled and didn't even look at Wen Hua. Wen Hua, who worked hard for the tavern, slammed the table and said angrily, "Don't rely on old Huang to support you. Ha ha ha, I don't have the divine ability to turn stones into gold. The 3 of us can't even eat as much as that big cat. The business of the tavern is so bad, but you don't seem to care. Say, didn't the customer from yesterday say that the tea wasn't good enough, and you wanted to take a plate and cut his head? And the customer from 3 days ago, he said that the tea wasn't fragrant enough, and you wanted to twist his head. Do you still have the law? Have I become a pig looking in the mirror? Am I not human anymore? The young girl faced Wen Hua and chuckled. Wen Hua slapped his forehead. He was so angry that he suffered internal injuries. Shopkeeper Huang gently smoothed out the chess pieces that were messed up by the porcelain bowl and said with a frown, "It's fine as long as you don't starve anyone to death. Even if you open the tavern to become the largest in Beimang, will you be successful?" Wen Hua replied with a question, "Isn't this considered successful?" The old scholar, who had a cultured and elegant bearing, glanced at him. "Then you might as well not practice the sword. I guarantee that I'll make you one of the richest gentlemen in Beimang. How about it?" Wen Hua waved his hand and said, "Go, go, go. If you don't let me practice the sword, you might as well kill me." Shopkeeper Huang smiled and asked, "Me?" Wen Hua hurriedly smiled and said, little one, you've been playing chess for so long. Are your hands sore? Are your shoulders tired? Should I rub and knock them for you?" The more chess pieces were placed, the densely packed black and white chess pieces and the relatively sparse colored glass pieces on the table. The white porcelain bowl became an eyesore. The old man waved his hand and said, "Take it away." Wen Hua exclaimed, picked up the bowl, and jogged to the kitchen. It was not very particular to make a bowl of scallion noodles for himself, but it was better to be happy together than to be happy alone. It was still okay to make 3 bowls of noodles for that strange father and daughter. Ignoring that kid Wen Hua, old man Huang looked at the chess game that was becoming clearer and clearer. He fiercely knocked a relatively large colored glass piece into the center of the board, and then he seemed to be hesitant about whether or not he should pull out a colored glass piece. The old man put down the chess box and said to himself, "My daughter, I've missed this good show this time. There's nothing I can do about it. That man in the capital that I caused to cut off his own tongue sent a letter over, wanting to settle old scores with me. On one hand, I couldn't bear it, but on the other hand, I was looking forward to the direction of the game, so I agreed to it this time. The chess pieces have to be alive and can be used as eyes. Only then will chess be interesting. Otherwise, look, this place is called Iron Gate Pass. It's a place with good feng shui. Dying there is much better than dying on the ghostly battlefield where tens of thousands of dead people share their fates. If this large colored glass piece that went to Western Shu eats up Zhao Kai and Su Fengnian's chess pieces and stays in Beiliang, it'll be much more interesting than him becoming some county king. Don't glare at me. It was that kid who wanted to barge into this game of chess. This time, I didn't do anything to trip him up. Don't worry, that kid made a big profit this time. He's going to be the king of Beiliang for sure. Su Fengnian is dead, and Chen Jibao is the king of Beiliang. He'll have to live in Su Zhao's shadow for the rest of his life. The Zhao family owes the Su family old scores, and with Chen Jibao's temperament, he'll definitely make them pay back bit by bit. That man in the capital doesn't want to see this happen. But that guy underestimated the next king of Beiliang. How can that kid surnamed Su be more open-minded and magnanimous than Chen Jibao? You can't blame that guy. After all, on the surface, Chen Jibao is much stronger than Su Fengnian, much, much stronger. But in a game of chess, if one's eyes are shallow, he'll suffer a great loss. The young girl shook the golden sunflower and chuckled. Chapter 683. The old man's life was full of tricks, which made people confused. Sometimes, people would only realize it after 10 or 20 years. However, the old man rarely told others. Since the person beside him was his daughter, he didn't hide anything. This time, neither side is clean. For the sake of the overall situation, the loser has to bear the consequences. The bottom line of this assassination was very clear. The son of the Zhao family wouldn't do it himself, and neither would Su Shao. As for whether their sons would live or die, it would depend on their luck, schemes, and ruthlessness. However, the emperor in the capital had an advantage that both sides knew. He had many sons. Even if one of them died, it wouldn't hurt him too much. However, the son of the Zhao family, who was the first to place a piece on the chessboard, obviously didn't expect Beiliang to respond so decisively. Su Fengnian personally went to intercept and kill, and many of his deeply rooted spies rose one after another. Otherwise, according to common sense, as long as the sword Garrett didn't have Yan's 3,000 elite cavalrymen, as long as the remnant of the Nangong family didn't get married, as long as Chao Chongqing didn't return the favor as promised, Su Fengnian and Zhao Kai would still lose. Qin Jibao would neither win nor lose in a short time. He would defeat Bailiang and become the king of Shu. However, when Su Shao died in the future, Bailiang would most likely be in his pocket. Compared to Su Shao, Qin Jibao has both advantages and disadvantages. His advantage is that he's young, and he deserves to be called a distinguished person in both civil and martial arts. He's kind of like me. Heh. Okay. I won't boast about this to you. Qin Jibao's advantage was that he had been accumulating power for many years. The one who had chilled the hearts of the scholars of the world was only his adoptive father, Su Shao, and not this war sage who was at the pinnacle of Confucianism. The disadvantage was also very obvious. If he wanted to be the king of Bailiang, he would not have the proper title. After he was bestowed the title of king of Western Shu, the morale that he had accumulated in the Bailiang army would also decline along with Su Zhao's death. Therefore, if he really wanted to be the emperor, he could only wait for at most 10 years. Any longer, whether it was luck or the hearts of the people, he would not be able to gather them. Everyone was the same. What kind of reputation could last for 2 or 3 generations? Only Su Shao was an anomaly in the Liang army. Qin Jibao, you're still lacking. I've long said that the bunch of old scholars in the Imperial Astronomer were all half-baked people who only knew rigid numbers and did not understand the mysteries of heaven like water. After being deceived by me for so many years, they still have no memory. Zhao Kai, this kid, is also interesting. Does he really think that his luck is invincible? That female master of the Western region is not that smart. Zhao Kai's luck was accumulated by Han Diaoxi, who had been with the dragon for more than 30 years, and that old bald donkey, Yang Taisui. In addition, she also had her own cultivation. With her by his side, Zhao Kai's luck was imperceptibly accumulated by another layer. Isn't he a piece of delicious cake that has the hope of ascending the throne and becoming the emperor? How many people from the 3 sects would have a good ending if they were personally involved? The Dragon Tree Monk and Yang Taisui were all dead. The few Taoist masters of the Dragon Tiger Mountain, the older generation, also did not have a good ending. In the end, they are all pitiful people who think that they are above the world, but in reality, they are not at all free and unfettered. I, your father, have fooled so many auspicious signs and phenomena during the spring and autumn period. This group of smart people still haven't seen through it. It can be seen that the difference between intelligence and intelligence is like the difference between heaven and earth. Beimang's Taiping is old, yet he refuses to accept his old age and still wants to play a game with me. I wonder if I was the one who created the chess situation that clearly divides the world. The world should be handed over to the young people. If you squat in the latrine and don't shit, how can you water the fields when the old shit is hard? Hearing this, the corners of the girl's mouth curled up as she chuckled. Wen Hua, who was carrying 3 bowls of onion noodles over, said angrily, "Old man Huang, can you not talk about this while eating?" Seeing that the shopkeeper did not move, Wen Hua glared at him and said, "Why aren't you clearing the table?" The old man chuckled and waved away the chess pieces on the table with a wave of his sleeve. Wen Hua put down 3 pairs of bowls and chopsticks and continued to chatter, "You only know how to play chess. So what if you can play chess? When I become a sword immortal, no matter who you are, if you dare to jump in front of me, I will serve you with a sword." The old man picked up his chopsticks and asked with a grin, "Oh? Then if I teach you how to use the sword and make you suffer so much, then when the time comes, the first thing you will do will be to slash me?" Wen Hua laughed and said, I wouldn't dare. How could I, Wen Hua, be an ungrateful person? I'm handsome, have a good temper, and have an ancient heart. Not to mention these advantages, the key is loyalty. The old man shook his head with a smile and was slightly helpless. He picked up a fragrant onion noodles with his chopsticks and ate with his head lowered as he said, "Go to Liang's capital." Wen Hua was stunned and asked in a low voice, "You're going directly to the capital to make a name for yourself?" Don't you need to warm up your hands in a small place first? The old man wrapped a chopstick of noodles and didn't stretch his neck to help his daughter blow the hot air off the noodles, fearing that she would burn herself. The girl laughed brilliantly and plucked a small petal of sunflower before placing it on the edge of the old man's bowl. It looked festive. The old man was in a good mood and said to Wenhua, "Don't you want to amaze the world with a single brilliant feat? Also, you'll be able to see the white jade lion, the brothel girl that you fell in love with at first sight." Wenhua slurped the noodles and said with a smile, "What's wrong with a brothel girl? I just like her. I'm definitely going to the capital this time." The old man smiled lightly. After eating the noodles, the old man took out some silver and instructed Wenhua, who had finished cleaning up the bowls and chopsticks, and returned to his seat. "Go buy a jug of good wine." Wenhua rolled his eyes and said, "Only you, old man Huang, can make a tea seller go buy wine to drink." Not long after, Wenhua returned with a jug of wine, and the old man said indifferently, "Keep the remaining silver for yourself." Wenhua chuckled. He said that he was going out, and then he went to the small room in his residence and took out a bag of silver that he had hidden well. He put it all away and ran out of the tea house. He had long since taken a fancy to a set of erotic paintings. Today, he had finally gathered enough silver and went out to buy it. In the past, he and Su Xiaoshuo both had this kind of hobby. However, at that time, they were traveling the Jianghu and were so poor that they didn't know what to eat every day. That was because they had no money. Now that they had some money, they had to think about their brothers. Wenhua thought that the next time they met, he would take this as a meeting gift. The gift was light, but the sentiment was heavy. "If that brat dares to dislike it, I'll definitely use a wooden sword to cut him." The girl didn't drink and watched the old man drink alone. The old man laughed softly and said, "Of the 13 rankings of the spring and autumn period, I alone occupy the top 3. As for the other 10 people, apart from Chen Zhibao who entered Shu, and Song Guanhai who dominated the literary scene of Liang for these years, they have pretty much all left. Oh, the 3 heroes of the Song family are also about to be killed by Lu Swan." The old man didn't seem to have a good tolerance for alcohol. After drinking more than half a jug, he fell asleep. The girl went to get a thick coat and quietly covered the old man. Then she stayed by his side and began to stare blankly again. The old man was still murmuring drunkenly, "Zhuanggong dreams of a butterfly dreams of Zhuanggong? I dream of Zhuanggong, I dream of a butterfly." Chapter 684. Su Fengnian rode on the same horse as the Daning, the otherworldly item with a new scarf and hidden sleeves. He did not feel uncomfortable at all. Moreover, his heart meridian was being held down by the Daning, guiding the chaotic qi down to Kunlun. At this moment, Su Fengnian really did not care about the awkwardness. After meeting up with the white horse, they rode back to Beiliang. As they approached the border, Su Fengnian raised his hand. The extraordinarily handsome blue-white one fell straight down and stopped on his arm. Soon, the rhythmic sound of horse hooves entered their ears. The leader was an extremely fat pig. His mount was a heavy Fergana colt. This fatty actually wore a set of light armor for the first time. Because of his body size, the saber at his waist was not easy to notice. It was hard to imagine that this was a general who had fought hundreds of battles. It was even harder to imagine that this fatty had once led 1,000 cavalry to conquer Shu. After Chu Lushan put on the armor, this time he saw His Royal Highness. He did not immediately roll off the horse and crawl on the ground with snot and tears flowing down his face. He only bowed on the horse and cupped his fists. He respectfully said, "Reporting to your highness, this general has already opened up a clean path." Su Fengnian frowned and said, "Su Shao is also here." Chu Lushan, who only brought 300 elite cavalry, raised his head and grinned. "Great general alone has already scared Gu Jintang's 60,000 troops out of their wits." The pale Su Fengnian nodded. Easily passing through the unobstructed border, Su Fengnian saw a horse galloping toward him. The father and son looked at each other without saying a word. After traveling for 20 li, Su Shao finally opened his mouth and asked, "Are your injuries serious?" Su Fengnian shook his head and said, "I won't die." Su Xiao glared at him and said, "Brat, what nonsense are you talking about?" Su Fengnian glared back. Su Xiao's arrogance immediately disappeared. He looked ahead and sighed, "Thank you for your hard work." Su Fengnian snapped, "Aren't you the same?" "Bullshit." Su Xiao nodded and didn't say anything. Huang Manor dragged the talisman General Golden Armor and walked as if he was flying. He followed behind Su Xiao and Su Fengnian with a silly smile on his face. Yuan Zuozong and Chu Lushan were running side by side, but they hated each other. There was a distance of 20 feet between them, and they did not look at each other from beginning to end. Chu Lushan didn't look at Yuan Zuozong. He just smiled and said, "General Yuan, it seems like you didn't do much." His arms and legs were still there, but His Highness was seriously injured. "What's wrong? You haven't met anyone worthy of your attention?" "Oh my, you don't even care about Yang Taisui." Yuan Zuozong ignored Lu Qiu's sarcastic remarks. "It takes two to clap." Unfortunately, Lu Qiu had always been the kind of hooligan who could slap her own face. "General Yuan, don't look down on me just because you've made great contributions. Come on, tell me about your great achievements outside the Iron Gate Pass. I'll set up a monument for you later. How about building a shrine for you? That's not a problem." Yuan Zuozong didn't hear, see, speak or get angry. Chu Lushan continued to nag, but he lowered his voice a little. "Hey, I thought you would follow Chen Jibao to Western Shu. You and Qi Danghua are the same. I'm so disappointed. Look at Yao Jian and Yi Shizhen, those two ungrateful wretches, they didn't let me down." Yuan Zuozong narrowed his apricot eyes. The fat man was not satisfied yet. He twisted his stubby neck and wanted to say something, but Su Fengnian turned back and reprimanded him. "Lu Qiu, go back to Bailiang and drink your green ant. If it's not enough, you can drink milk and piss as you wish." Chu Lushan shrunk his neck and finally couldn't hold it anymore. He showed his true face and said with a flattering face, "Whatever His Highness says." Yuan Zuozong looked calm. Chu Lushan muttered, "He didn't do what he should do, but he did what he shouldn't do. Son of a bitch." Yuan Zuozong suddenly said, "On the way here, His Highness said to invite Qi Danghua to drink together." Chu Lushan opened his eyes wide, turned his head and asked, "Say it again?" Yuan Zuozong meditated like a stone Buddha again and didn't say a word. Chu Lushan wiped the hot sweat on his forehead. "Son of a bitch, I'm more nervous than when I heard that you were going to light my sky lantern." Su Xiao turned his head and glanced at the two adopted sons who were like fire and water for many years. He sighed quietly. Su Fengnian inhaled for a long time but did not exhale. Then, he exhaled heavily and turned to ask, "Why?" Su Xiao said calmly, "Huang Man didn't get close to his second sister. It's not without reason." Su Fengnian's lips trembled. He wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. Su Xiao said, "Although she was not born by me and your mother, I never treated her as a man of sacrifice. I only know that I have 2 daughters, 2 sons, and 2 daughters. All 3 of them are handsome like their mother. Only the second daughter looks like me, Su Xiao. If I don't love her, who will I love? Raising sons and daughters is a different way of raising. As a father, I don't know if it's right or wrong. To be honest, the one who suffered the most is still you. Among all the children, I have never scolded anyone. I only hit you once, and it was only twice and thrice that I let you run away. Who knows when I will have to send you off? Your mother passed away early, otherwise she would definitely beat me to death. Then why didn't you stop my sister?" "I couldn't. I sent a message to her saying that Chao Chongqing would go to stop them. She still went. The Great Snow Dragon Cavalry almost had a mutiny. This silly daughter is more like my own. Don't you think she's like me?" "Yes. By the way, you can tell these words to my sister later." "I don't dare. You always chase me with a broom and a stool. If my daughter is really angry, she will draw her sword." Su Fengnian said helplessly, "Look at you, the king of Bailiang." Su Xiao laughed and said, "It's fine as long as you're promising. Su Fengnian gently waved his arm. The 6-year-old phoenix that had accompanied him for many years spread its wings and flew high into the sky. Su Fengnian looked at the divine bird that was gradually becoming a black dot in the sky. He said softly, "I really couldn't tell. After putting on the armor, you look like a general." Su Shao also raised his head to look at the sky. He said softly, "You will be the same in the future." A luxurious carriage made of dazzling jade and jewels entered Beiliang's post house. It was said that those who wandered the Jianghu should not reveal their true colors. The master of this carriage really did not know the dangers of the Jianghu. The coachman was a middle-aged man with a robust physique. It was late autumn and the chill was penetrating. He was still wearing a tight black shirt. The muscles all over his body were bulging, but his aura was restrained as usual. His breathing was unhurried and uninterrupted like a long river. It was clear that he was already at the peak of an external expert. From this, it could be seen that the person sitting in the carriage had a reason to be domineering and had something to rely on. The middle-aged coachman's surname was Hongyu. This journey had been a bloody one. From the southeast of the dynasty to the northwest of Liang, there were no less than 20 sect leaders or elders who had been turned into corpses overnight. These people were all famous in the Jianghu. They were definitely not small fries who could fish for fame with just a few moves. Hongyu sighed. He was somewhat unable to get off the tiger. Other than feeling helpless in the depths of his heart, his respect for the young master behind him grew stronger and stronger. There were some things that he did not even dare to say to her face. It was true that he had helped her find food to supplement her martial arts. It was true that he was helping the tiger do evil, but this time, she had entered Beiliang. Wasn't she asking a tiger for its skin? In the carriage, a young woman without a maid was applying rouge in front of the mirror. She was wearing a purple dress with large sleeves. Fortunately, she was able to suppress this kind of pure color. Her lips were already a bit sickly purple. At this moment, she was using the pink rouge from an expensive brocade box to cover them up. Otherwise, her yin qi would far surpass her heroic spirit. She pursed her lips. There was no fluctuation of emotion in her eyes. Normally, a woman would hold a mirror and apply makeup. Moreover, she was so beautiful that even the fishes would fall and the geese would fall. It was always a joyous occasion. She casually threw away the bronze mirror and the brocade box. After thinking for a while, she picked up the bronze mirror again. She stretched out a finger and drew on the surface of the mirror. It was fragmented. She was the mistress of the great Nyogang of Mount Hui, Xianyuan Qingfeng. There were no less than 100 books piled up in the carriage. Most of them were secret manuals that the Xianyuan family had collected for hundreds of years. If she wanted to give it to someone, it would be no different from giving a pile of scrap metal. The problem was that the other party might not be willing to accept it. This made Xianyuan Qingfeng frown. The aura around her became increasingly gloomy, like a withered osmanthus tree in a rainy day. Based on the secret arts recorded in her family's books, she was like a female Tao Tai that chose people to devour in the past year. She had absorbed a lot of power and cultivation, allowing her martial arts realm to improve rapidly. Before she went down the mountain, a group of old enemies of Mount Hui bullied her because she was the mistress of the house. They teamed up and went up the mountain to pick a fight. She didn't care that there were immortals from the neighboring Mount Longhu. She caught all of them and turned them into dried corpses. The Celestial Master's residence, which she had a good relationship with, had already stated that the Xianyuan family's disciples were not allowed to set foot on Mount Longhu. But would she, Xianyuan Qingfeng, care about this? Xianyuan Qingfeng stretched out a finger and gently smoothed the rouge on her lips. The corner of her mouth curled up, full of sarcasm. When I reach the top of the martial arts world, my first target will be that nest of noble people from the Celestial Master's residence. She lifted the curtain and sat lazily behind her guest, Hongyu. Hongyu didn't turn around. He chuckled and said, "We're in Beiliang territory." Xianyuan Qingfeng nodded and asked, "Ancestor Lu has a crooked poem. It says that after receiving the 3 pure immortality technique, one has already attained the diamond body. You said that the finger profound realm is higher than the diamond body. Is it because of this poem that the immortality technique comes first and the diamond body comes second? Hong Yu laughed out loud. Master, you'll have to ask Huang Fengfua about this. I don't really understand. In this life, I only know how to immerse myself in martial arts. In the past, I casually obtained a secret manual and followed it to the end. Later on, when I arrived at Mount Hui, I only picked 1 or 2 books to study. I didn't really think about reading more. In the end, I'm still stupid and stubborn. There's no medicine to cure me. The cool breeze of Bailiang and the autumn breeze brushed against one's face. Xianyuan Qingfeng's mood became more relaxed, and some of her sinister aura disappeared. She smiled and said, Uncle Hong, Huang Fengfua has already broken through the first rank. You should also catch up. Otherwise, there won't be many people in Mount Hui who can show off in Jianghu. Chapter 685. Hong Tuo nodded. Don't worry, family head. I won't slack off. It's easy at the beginning to walk the path of external martial arts, but it's not easy to go from external martial arts to internal martial arts. However, since family head has already pointed out a clear path for me, I'll be useless if I still can't reach the first rank Vajra realm. Xianyuan Qingfeng, who was in a lazy mood, grunted in acknowledgement. The master and servant were silent for a long time. Xianyuan Qingfeng suddenly asked in a seemingly joking manner, Uncle Hong, will you stab me in the back one day when I'm deserted by everyone? With his back facing her, Hong Tuo's hand froze for a moment before he quickly waved it down and smiled. I won't. It's all thanks to your father, Xianyuan Jingsheng, that I'm where I am today. I don't know how to talk about benevolence, righteousness, and morality, but I'm destined to help those close to me instead of reason. Xianyuan Qingfeng smiled strangely and said calmly, then Uncle Hong will stay in Bailiang's army. Hong Tuo resisted the urge to turn around and asked softly, what? Uncle Hong, you're familiar with the art of war. You're the one who nurtured the Mount Huishan private cavalry. That Bailiang heir will most likely accept you. When he becomes the king of Bailiang, there will be a day when you stand out. It's 1,000 times better than being a hired thug for me, a great demon of the Jianghu. It doesn't matter if you think I'm keeping you as a hostage in Bailiang because I don't trust you and don't want to keep you by my side. It's settled then. Hong Tuo said in a deep voice, even if I'm in Bailiang, I won't forget that I'm a servant of Mount Huishan. Xianyuan Qingfeng leaned against the wooden wall outside the carriage and didn't say anything. Hong Tuo didn't continue to express his gratitude. Xianyuan Qingfeng's gaze shifted from behind Hong Tuo to the willow tree on the side of the road. Willow, homophonic. Xianyuan Qingfeng stretched out 2 fingers and made a pinching motion toward the willow tree beside the road. He cut off a branch out of thin air and pulled it back to his hand. Hong Tuo's breathing slowed down in an instant. Xianyuan Qingfeng weaved a willow headband and wore it on his head, smiling sweetly. The brocade pouch, which was equivalent to his last words, had clearly said that Hong Yu had a rebellious streak. He looked simple and honest, but he was actually cunning and needed to be suppressed by force. It wasn't that Xianyuan Qingfeng didn't have the confidence to make him submit, but he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to control himself and would skin this traitorous fellow alive. In her eyes, Hong Yu was nothing. She swore to become the #1 martial artist as a woman. The boundless paddy fields outside Xiangfan City had been mostly harvested. It was a bumper harvest year, and the common people all said that it was thanks to the new king of Jing'an's good fortune. However, this king of Jing'an, Zhao Sun, had a good reputation among the common people, but among the Qing province's Green Party, his reputation took a turn for the worse. They all scolded this vassal king for forgetting his roots and burning the bridge after crossing the river. He had only just become a vassal king, but he had already begun to side with outsiders. The reason was that the imperial court had ordered all the vassals to transfer their elite troops to the border to change the defense and increase the defense. The king of Jing'an had spared no effort, causing the Green Party, whose words in the imperial court had already lost more and more weight, to be filled with complaints. That's right, this vassal king that the imperial court had put on the table was originally from Zhao Sun's 2 diagrams and 13 strategies when he entered the capital. Now, he had shot himself in the foot. Zhao Sun, this civil official, vassal king who had made an exception to take on the role of administrator, was indeed ruthless enough. He did it without any hesitation, and was cursed by the Qing province's generals who were used to being a mountain king. When they met in private, they all said that this kind of unambitious vassal king was not worthy of being the king of Jing and who was responsible for peace and prosperity. He should just go to the imperial court and be the assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights. However, looking at the situation, the king of Jing'an, Zhao Sun, seemed to be enjoying it. He did a lot of things that benefited the common people and did not mind being disliked by the Green Party's big shots. Because of the special identity of the administrator, he was not restricted by the vassals. He even took the initiative to visit the Green Party's big shots several times, so he was not rejected. However, the old men and young people behind the noble families also did not give the king of Jing'an any face. The deep friendship accumulated over the years in the past had been diluted. Only some of the younger generation and many people who did not have a say in the family for the time being still had a good impression of Zhao Sun. Today, in the suburbs of Xiangfan, a farmer's family was flattered. Two scholar-like young masters actually stopped their horses and got off. One of them, who was dressed in luxurious clothes, even personally went to the field to help them harvest the rice. At first, the farmer in charge of the family did not dare to let the young master do it for fear that he would cut his hands. However, he could not endure the smile on the young master's face and begged, so he trembled in fear and agreed. The young master was indeed a scholar who looked very knowledgeable. He learned everything quickly. After the autumn harvest of 1 mu of land, the young master harvested the 2nd mu of rice as skillfully as a farmer who was used to farming. When the old farmer's granddaughter handed the young master a kettle of water, her face was extremely red. This made the old farmer even more happy. He secretly joked about his granddaughter, saying that the young master came from a rich family and looked down on a girl like her. After harvesting the golden rice, the young master helped to load it onto the ox cart. The tanned old farmer felt sorry for the young master's clothes. In the end, he looked at his granddaughter's playful appearance and shook his head with a smile. He sighed in his heart that the young master was really a good person. The young master who personally went into the field to harvest the rice sat on the ridge of the field. He wiped the sweat from his forehead, took off his shoes and socks, and stepped on the muddy ground. Beside him was a young scholar with a gentle smile. He was dressed plainly, no different from a poor scholar. He did not go into the field because he was blind. There was an attendant hidden in the distance who wanted to bring a pot of iced cold wine that was sent from the mansion on a fast horse, but he was dismissed by the young master in brocade clothes. He smiled and asked, "Lu Su, do you think this king knows the suffering of the people?" The blind scholar twitched the corner of his mouth. "If you don't mention the words 'this king,' then you can be considered to know the suffering of the people." The young master laughed. He did not care about such disrespectful words at all. King of Jing'an, Zhao Sun. The blind Lu Su who used to make a living by gambling chess in Yongzi Alley. Zhao Sun sighed and said worriedly, "Lu Su, regarding the matter of the Green Party, you told me to first feed the small fish, then use the long line to fatten them up. Then, use a slow fire to cook the old tortoise. I did everything according to your established strategy. These are not difficult. After all, we are all family. The Green Party is already on the verge of collapse and is destined to fall apart. They are a group of stragglers who have been chased out of the core of the imperial court. Most of them have no other choice but to rely on me. However, we are in an urgent situation right now. The Song family of the 3 heroes in the capital is determined to bite me. That old man Song Guanhai created the school of mind and dominated the literary world for 20 years. After my dynasty calmed down, this old man Song wrote 2 biographies, Loyal Minister and Treacherous Minister. He also compiled a complete book of 9 pavilions. Every month, on the 15th day of the month, he commented on the scholars of the world and was allowed to ride a horse in the imperial city. The young master Song Jiqiu surpassed his master and took over as the right chancellor of the imperial college. Every word of his was worth 1,000 gold. Even his majesty praised him endlessly. Now that the imperial examinations are selecting scholars, most of the scholars have no choice but to write the Song style to curry favor with the examiners. The young phoenix of the Song family, Song Kelly, also did not disgrace his family's reputation. In one fell swoop, he was ranked second and became the new yellow gatekeeper. If he is sent out to be an official for a few more years, he will immediately mix with the sand and come to our side. Song Guanhai still bears a grudge. Father humiliated him in court and called him an old man. Now, he is in the capital every day and constantly impeached me in the imperial court. Even if I heard that he is now ill and does not have many days left to live, with Song Jiqiu and Song Kelly around, it will be an almost endless battle for us. Perhaps it was because Lu Su was blind, but when he listened to others, he seemed to be particularly attentive. He had a gentle temperament and never interrupted others when they were talking. Naturally, he would not say anything extravagant. He quietly waited for the king of Jing'an to finish complaining. He did not jump to conclusions and only asked calmly, "King of Jing'an, do you know that Song Guanhai was a loyal and good official in the palace?" Zhao Sun was influenced by Lu Su. Coupled with the fact that he was not hot-tempered, he was much calmer now. He nodded and said, "Of course I know." During the spring and autumn period, Song Guanhai, who was a slave of 3 surnames, told the late emperor about the difference between a loyal official and a good official in order to clear his name. A good official is one who is not afraid of being punished by swords and axes. In order to leave his name in history, he let the emperor be cursed by history books. On the other hand, a loyal official is one who diligently assists the emperor to achieve great things. At the same time, he also gains a good reputation. His descendants pass on the torch and his fortune is boundless. Song Guanhai, that old man, of course, regarded himself as a loyal official. In the past 20 years, he has ridiculed, remonstrated, and remonstrated countless times. Even the empress has personally pleaded with the emperor on his behalf several times. Only then did he escape imprisonment. On this point, I really admire this old man's song from the bottom of my heart. The corner of Lu Su's mouth curled up into a mocking smile. He shook his head and said slowly, "It's just the long and short doctrines of a school of vertical and horizontal doctrine." Suddenly he uses Confucianism, then he turns to old man Huang, and then he worships the law. There's no integrity to speak of, so he can't be called a teacher. His Majesty once said that teacher song is slow and understanding, but I think it's charming. The world thinks it's a compliment, but if you look deeper, it's not a good thing. In other words, it's an argument that has a lot of leeway. After being stunned for a moment, Zhao Sun laughed happily. He clapped his hands and said, "Fresh, fresh. Lu Su, your words are very satisfying. I want to drink wine." Lu Su's state of mind was still as calm as an ancient well. He smiled faintly and said, "The last time I asked the maid to read the secret letter you sent from the capital, one of the rumors was written ambiguously. It was rumored that Song Guanhai secretly kept a copy of the memorial to the emperor. However, he has resisted the urge to hand it over to the historian. This is a person who wants to be both a loyal and a good official." Chapter 686. Zhao Sun frowned and said, "It's hard to say whether this is true or not. Even if Song Guanhai really does have the secret memorials, as long as we don't hand them over to the scribes, what can we do with them? If we bring them into the coffin one day, it's even more hopeless. This old man's song will definitely be able to let His Majesty write the inscription on the tombstone after his death." Lu Su said calmly, "Based on Song Guanhai's character, it must be true. As for whether he will hand them over to the scribes after his death, considering the good fortune of his descendants, even if he is old and muddle-headed, his son Song Jiqiu will stop him." "But," Zhao Sun said impatiently, tell me. Lu Su, who had no intention of keeping them in suspense, paused. Zhao Sun hurriedly apologized with a smile. "I was too impatient." Lu Su said, "When people are approaching old age, especially when they know that they are still alive, some powerful people who have no foresight and no worries will often make some mistakes that can be big or small. Even if Song Jiqiu wants to patch it up, it's not watertight. We just need to wait until Song Guanhai passes away and strike while the iron is hot." We can use the spies in the Song residence to deliberately leak this information to a certain power in the capital that is hostile to the Song family. If there are no dead soldiers or spies, it's fine. Groundless rumors and slanders are just as reliable. The capital has no shortage of people who make groundless accusations. But there is one thing that is extremely important. The news must be passed quickly and reach the emperor's ears as soon as possible. We must not give the Song family the time to destroy the copies of the memorials. If they were quickly destroyed, then if they wanted to overthrow Song Guanhai, they would have to let the Prince of Jing'an's estate take the lead and instruct someone to gather 342 memorials and spread them throughout the capital. However, this way, you would inevitably be implicated, which would not be wise. We can't underestimate the intelligence of His Majesty's spies and the keen senses of those old people in the officialdom. Also, Prince Jing'an, please keep in mind that Song Guanhai is the eldest imperial prince and the fourth imperial prince's benevolent teacher. Although you've met them once in the capital and you seem to have a good impression of each other, the disadvantages far outweigh the advantages. If there was no need for King of Jing'an to personally deal with the Song clan's disaster, and if there were no traces left behind, then they could tarnish their own reputation by faking the leak of a copy of the memorial, saying that it was all because of you. This way, you can completely remove yourself from the capital's officialdom and temporarily distance yourself from the two princes. Furthermore, you don't have to worry about His Majesty becoming suspicious of you. After all, he is not an ignorant and mediocre ruler. Instead, he will only place more trust in you. This is the right path for Xiang Fan and you, the administrator. King of Jing'an, Zhao Sun, mulled over it carefully and nodded repeatedly. However, Zhao Sun immediately asked, can this small matter really topple the Song family? Lu Su smelled the unique fragrance of the autumn rice paddies and a smile finally appeared on his face. When acting in the officialdom, one can't go overboard. It's the same principle as stewing old duck soup. Slowly stewing it will bring out the flavor, but if it's too long, it will lose its flavor. The Song family's scholarship is good, but as an official, they are far inferior to Grand Secretary Zhang, Chancellor Huan, and the others. Compared to West Chu's Grand Preceptor's son, they are far inferior. Also, since ancient times, the requirements for writing are great, but the requirements for getting to the point are small. Don't look down on this kind of small matter. What truly made the Song family fall from glory is precisely this kind of small matter. Officials who reach the pinnacle of glory are always accompanied by fortune and misfortune. Song Guanhai is not Su Shao, nor is he Gu Jiantang, nor is he Zhang Julu, who seems domineering and eccentric, but actually has an incomparably deep foundation. The Song family, which has only been rich for 3 generations, has lost its foundation and is frivolous. It seems that the family is full of glory, but Song Guanhai has made too many enemies, so it is very difficult for them to maintain their integrity in their later years. Song Jiqiu is the right chancellor of the Imperial College, Song Kelly's little yellow sect. Once disaster befalls them, those students who call themselves the Song sect's lackeys will mostly rush home to pick up their brushes and change sides. Not willing to hit someone when they are down can already be considered outstanding. King of Jing'an, you can choose to make a move after Song Guanhai's death, or you can make a move when Song Guanhai is seriously ill. If it's the latter, you can probably anger and scare this old man to death. Zhao Sun fell back, lying down on the ridge of the field. He crossed his legs and looked at the sky with narrowed eyes. Then what will happen to Song Jiqiu and Song Kelly? Lu Su replied, let's see how they will deal with it. They will bring a bramble and ask for punishment. Even if they don't acknowledge their father and acknowledge the imperial court, there is still hope for them to make a comeback. If filial piety is the most important thing, or even a little bit of extravagant hope of being both loyal and filial, then they will die in poverty. Zhao Sun was speechless. Lu Su was also silent. He grabbed a handful of soil. Zhao Sun suddenly sat up and asked with a smile, where did you learn all these things? Lu Su said self-deprecatingly, I was blind and had nothing to do, so I could only blindly think about some things. Zhao Sun stretched lazily. Do you think that old duck soup is really delicious? When we go back, I'll ask everyone in the residence to make 2 cups for you. Lu Su nodded and said, as long as you don't deduct my salary." Zhao Sun, who had taken note of the matter of making the soup, patted his butt and stood up. Lu Su gently put down the handful of soil in his hand and stood up as well. He said softly, "That woman's background is unknown. I hope that King of Jing and won't get too involved with her. It's fine as long as you don't fall in love with her." Zhao Sun said sternly, "How dare you?" Lu Su smiled but did not say anything. They were in a deadlock. Zhao Sun's expression suddenly changed. He grabbed Lu Su's arm and said sincerely, "I've been waiting for you to say this. I know that in Xiang Fan, only you are sincere to me. How can Zhao Sun not know? Lu Su, I hope that in the future, when I take the wrong path, please be frank with me. I'm just a blind man who can't take the imperial examinations and can't be an official. As long as King of Jing'an is willing to tell me, I will tell you everything I know." Chapter 687. Hey, do you want to hear about the matters in bed? I, Zhao Sun, can even tell you about this. Don't listen to indecent things. Don't. Lu Su, you taught me everything. Today, I must turn the tables and tell you about the matters between men and women. Don't listen to indecent things. Other than when the old king of Jing'an and Zhaoheng were still alive, Lu Su had been transferred to various government offices to serve as minor officials. After Zhao Sun's succession was passed down, he had been living in the palace. Unexpectedly, he did not hold any official position and was only considered an advisor. However, in the palace, no one dared to neglect the most popular person in front of the vassal king. Even the head butler, who had been in charge of the palace for 2 generations, was also concerned about the blind Lu Su's well-being when he met him, fearing that he would make the slightest mistake. And Lu Su was indeed easy to talk to. Occasionally, when he was free, he would be able to get along well with the servants in the mansion. He would tell stories about the Fox Immortal's strange stories, help people to read their fortunes, read their palms, and write couplets. He would also grant anyone's request. He was truly an individual immortal who had no desires. No matter how petty and difficult it was to deal with someone, they would not be able to hate him. Who would be so free to make things difficult for a kind person who would not snatch anything from you but could help you at any time? Lu Su's residence was quiet and elegant. Although it was a standalone residence, the place was not very impressive. In the courtyard, other than a few maids who were in charge of cleaning and chores, there was only a personal maid called Xing Hua who served this young blind man who stood aloof from worldly affairs. In the dead of night, Lu Su sat in the study and took care of Xing Hua. He specially lit 2 oil lamps. As for whether or not the high-grade turpentine oil was as precious as gold, Lu Su did not care about this kind of thing. Lu Su was currently doing something he had been doing before he became blind. He mocked himself for being a dog's tail. That was to collect the 23 historical records, as well as the chronicles of the various prefectures and counties under the heavens, as well as the compilations and memorials of various generations of famous officials of various dynasties. Regardless of whether it was the national classics or the imperial decrees, or the official records of the people's secrets, he would record whatever he could get his hands on. Other than the king of Jing'an's collection of books, he also asked Zhao Sun to secretly purchase them. Lu Su still did not haggle over how much money he had spent. Lu Su had the maidservant Xing Hua read the text every day, and also helped to draw the outline of the geographical map. He would personally write in tiny regular script and make detailed annotations on the first draft of the book. So far, he had already completed more than 10 volumes of the book, which was placed in a bamboo basket in the corner of the study room. For the time being, the title of the book was The Spring and Autumn Prescriptions for the Cure of Diseases in the Prefectures. He intentionally demoted himself as a mediocre doctor who only knew how to treat headaches, taking the pulse and treating the diseases of the prefectures in the world. As for whether or not he could prescribe the right medicine, it would be up to the person who would read the book in the future to decide. It was not accurate to call it a military classic. It was wrong to call it a simple geographical map. Zhao Sun once came to the study room and casually flipped through the book. He had no interest in reading it. Lu Su, who only thought of writing this book as a leisure task, did not force him. Lu Su put down the brush and rested. He rotated his wrist. Xinghua asked if he wanted a shoulder rub or a back rub. Lu Su, who was still not used to being eagerly served, shook his head. Xinghua was an elite warrior of sacrifice in the Jing and palace. She was passed down from Zhao Heng to Zhao Sun. She was proficient in zither, chess, calligraphy, and painting. She must be even more proficient in protecting people and killing people. She could calmly face death in order to protect Lu Su. She could also kill Lu Su without batting an eyelid because of Zhao Sun's words. Lu Suan was blind, but he was well aware of it. Moreover, he would not bear any grudges against her or the king of Jing, and because of this. As the saying goes, don't suspect people if you use them. If you doubt them, don't use them. It was also said that one must always be on guard against people. Anyway, all the principles in the world had been explained. But if there were too many principles, it was as good as not saying anything. Lu Su had been studying how to carefully weigh people's hearts. In the end, he came to the conclusion that women and children all knew how to weigh the pros and cons. After thinking about it, he could only come up with a method that Lu Suan thought was stupid. It was to use the number of chess pieces to calculate the thickness of people's hearts. Lu Su listened to the subtle sound of the burning lantern and smiled. Xinghua, there are countless sounds in the world. Which one do you like the most? Xinghua looked ordinary, but her voice was crisp and pleasant. Her figure was also graceful. Because she had to read books and occasionally write for Lu Su, she sat on the chair next to him. She smiled and said, "Young master, I don't know. But if you give me some choices, I can answer." Lu Su nodded gently. After thinking for a while, he said, "The sound of spring, the sound of zither, the sound of pine waves, the sound of bamboo whistling, the sound of mountain birds, the sound of banana rain, the sound of falling leaves, the sound of children reading, the sound of famous prostitutes singing, and the sound of young girls selling flowers." Xinghua covered her mouth and smiled. "I will definitely choose the sound of flowers selling flowers." Lu Su laughed involuntarily. "I forgot that your name is Xinghua. But let me tell you, there was a great writer in the previous dynasty who was called the Son of Poetry. His words were the same as yours. He also said that among the thousands of sounds of heaven and earth, the sound of flowers selling flowers in the deep alleys of the market was the most heartbreaking." Xinghua asked doubtfully, "Young master, why is that?" Lu Su probably had a request in front of her, so he was not stingy with his words. "I have been thinking about the reason all these years. I will tell you when I have figured it out." Xinghua was much more casual after spending so much time with Lu Su. She joked, "There are also things that you don't understand?" "There are many." The blind scholar who was once praised by the king of Jing as not inferior to Yuan Benshi, picked up his brush again and bent over the table to write the prescription. This king was Zhao Heng, not Zhao Sun. Lu Su still did not know who Yuan Benshi was that made Zhao Heng hold a grudge against him before his death. Chapter 688. Xianyuan Qingfeng handed over a wooden name thorn made from the heart of a 1,000-year-old cassia tree and was brought to Bailiang Palace by the steward. They passed through corridors and finally arrived at the pavilion in the middle of Tidehark Lake. The young man's hair was as white as frost. He casually tied a red rope into a knot and sat on the railing near the water. He leaned against the gold-painted pillar and played with the name thorn Xianyuan Qingfeng gave to the prince's estate. Xianyuan Qingfeng stood outside the pavilion on a lotus pedestal embedded in the water. Along the way, all sorts of feelings welled up in his heart. Years ago, during the Lantern Festival in Wuzhou, this handsome young man was together with a perverted scoundrel. After an argument, he was chased away by her retainer like a rat across the street. At that time, Xianyuan Qingfeng only thought of him as a useless and uninteresting man from a poor family. He was uneducated and had no hope of passing the imperial examinations. He could only rely on his looks to trick some pretty girls from small families. Afterwards, when he occasionally thought of that farce, he only guessed that his mother must be a great beauty capable of causing the downfall of a country to be able to give birth to such a good-looking son. Who would have thought that after reuniting with him at Mount Hui, he would suddenly become the infamous heir of the Northern Liang Empire, leading 100 armored soldiers into the Longhu Empire. It could be said that it was because of him that she was able to become the owner of the Bull Gang. However, Xianyuan Qingfeng still couldn't connect him to the man who was about to become the king of Beiliang. It wasn't until she personally stepped into the prince's estate on Mount Qingliang that she gradually understood that Su Fengnian would become the second prince of Liang dynasty after Su Shao. Su Fengnian rubbed the name thorn made from the heart of a acacia tree and smiled at the woman who came all the way from Jianzhou to the northwest of the dynasty. There were many thousand-year-old acacias on Mount Fengyao, but they gradually died in the past 100 years. The last Tanguay was no exception. Thus, Mount Hui's acacia wine became a masterpiece. Su Fengnian waved his hand and asked softly, other than the 100-odd secret manuals, did you bring acacia wine? Xianyuan Qingfeng walked into the pavilion and chose a seat furthest away from him. He looked straight ahead and calmly said, there isn't much left in Mount Hui, but if you want a drink, I'll bring you a jar next time. Su Fengnian placed his nameplate on his knees. His face showed signs of fatigue. He closed his eyes to rest. He didn't seem to be a good host. Xianyuan Qingfeng didn't complain at all. In her opinion, as long as he was Butcher's eldest son, he had the right to be arrogant. She asked calmly, I've always heard that Beiliang Palace's security is loose on the outside but tight on the inside. They're treating the Jianghu assassin as a fat fish to be hooked. Why is your highness willing to let me enter the pavilion? Aren't you afraid that I'm also an assassin? Su Fengnian snapped his fingers. He leapt out of the lake in a red robe and over the roof of the pavilion before plunging back into the lake. It was a beautiful scene, like a red carp jumping over a dragon's gate. Apart from the otherworldly item in the red robe that had a habit of staying in the lake, a servant girl slowly walked over with a tray filled with bait for viewing. Su Fengnian waved his hand, indicating that he should pass it to Xianyuan Qingfeng. Su Fengnian opened his eyes and sat back on the satin bench. I've heard about the commotion at Mount Hui. But even if your cultivation has advanced by leaps and bounds, it won't be easy for you to kill me if I let you sit side by side with me. Xianyuan Qingfeng sneered. Beiliang Palace really doesn't lack experts. Su Fengnian glanced at the otherworldly item that was playing leisurely in the tide-listening lake and said with a smile, this celestial state expert was exchanged with my life and fortune. You get what you pay for. Xianyuan Qingfeng, don't be so sarcastic. Xianyuan Qingfeng didn't throw the bait into the lake. I wouldn't dare, he said expressionlessly. Su Fengnian didn't care about this matter and asked, you want me to support you to become the leader of the southern Jianghu with only 100 or so manuals? Don't you think you're being a bit greedy? You're not my wife either. Why would I do such a bad deal? Xianyuan Qingfeng grabbed a handful of bait from the green-glazed peony tray. He wasn't in a hurry to throw it into the lake to enjoy the scene of tens of thousands of carps rolling in the water. I can help you in your hour of need, he said slowly. Su Fengnian stretched out his hand. Xianyuan Qingfeng said, there's no lack of people in Mount Hui who are eager for success and have real talent. Hong Yu is one of them. These boorish men of Jianghu don't lack skill or ambition. What they lack is a path. As long as Beiliang is willing to accept them and lure them with enough bait, they'll be willing to take the bait. But there's one thing I have to tell you, Xianyuan Qingfeng. They'll enter Beiliang to seek positions and wealth, but they won't be willing to put their lives on the line. If you want them to fight on the border after entering the Beiliang army, they'll definitely refuse. But if you want them to become a 6th or 7th rank military officer in Beiliang, as long as it's an official's hat, they'll be willing to do 80 to 90% of their work for you. Su Fengnian sneered, Xianyuan Qingfeng, is your official's hat a cabbage from a roadside stall? Xianyuan Qingfeng threw a handful of bait into the lake and said calmly, everyone knows that Chen Jibao entered Shu and was conferred the title of king. Most of this war saint's trusted subordinates have also resigned and gone to Shu. There's also a large number of 6th or 7th rank military officers who are itching to make a move. When the time comes, why don't you give these newly vacated seats to anyone? It's better to do them a favor at no cost. The people I'll give you are all young, but they've been famous for a long time. Give them 1 or 2 years and they'll be able to convince the masses. Although I, Xianyuan Qingfeng, have never been an official, I do know a little about the art of managing people. A new emperor brings in new courtiers. If you want to be the king of Bailiang, you'll need some of your own people, even if they're a little mixed up. Su Fengnian smiled. With your little skill, you only know a little about the art of managing people. It can't be called the art of managing people. It's the same as riding a sword. Chapter 689. Xianyuan Qingfeng didn't retort, but poured the entire tray of bait into the lake with a cold expression. The koi fish splashed into the water, creating a clamor. Su Fengnian waited for the lake to calm down before saying helplessly, "When will you change this bad temper of yours?" "When Wen Hua and I first met you, although we couldn't control our mouths and flirted with you and were in the wrong first, how many noble ladies would be so calculative as you? Now that you've become the head of the Huishan clan and want to unify the Jianghu, with your terrible temperament, even if you become a top-notch expert in martial arts, you're destined to be alone. Of all the people I could nurture, why did I have to nurture you? You're destined to draw water with a bamboo basket, wasting not only money but also energy. It's true that we wouldn't have known each other if we hadn't fought, but when we sit down to do business, we have to pay attention to the rules of doing business." Xianyuan Qingfeng stared at Su Fengnian, his eyes cold. "Su Fengnian, it's not your turn to lecture me." Su Fengnian, who hadn't rested much since arriving at the prince's estate, leaned against the pillar again and said softly, "I treat you as half a friend, that's why I'm nagging you with these unflattering words. It's up to you whether you want to listen or not." Xianyuan Qingfeng sneered. "Can't you be frank with me?" Su Fengnian gently clapped his hands and smiled. "All right then. Since you have a favor to ask of me this time, I'll be frank with you. I have a friend who's fighting Han Diaosi in the western regions. It's been a while now, and the prince's estate has sent a few loyalists over to help, but they haven't been very effective. Now that your cultivation has skyrocketed, why don't you go and warm up? Just treat it as a dangerous martial arts practice." "Oh right, Xianyuan Qingfeng, do you have a man you like? If not, that's good. That friend of mine is the #1 beauty in the world, Nangong Push. The #2 beauty, Chen Yu, is rated as not inferior to Nangong. That's Nangong. I'm used to calling him White Fox Face, but remember not to call him that. You'll get beaten up. Assassinating the world's premier eunuch, Han Diaosi, can also be considered as a proof of your allegiance to the Bailiang. Only when there is no way out can I rest assured and trust you, the head of the Huishan clan, who is thousands of miles away." Xianyuan Qingfeng sneered. "This is your imperial person technique? It really can't be said to be perfect." Su Fengnian shook his head and said, "I'm the same as you. I only know how to control people. We're both newborn calves in the officialdom." Xianyuan Qingfeng glanced at the crown prince's snow-white hair and asked with a smile, "Su Fengnian, what happened?" Su Fengnian stroked his hair and said calmly, "To put it nicely, I'm at the pseudo-finger profound realm. To put it bluntly, I'm sure you can tell that even if I'm fully recovered, my cultivation base won't even be at the second rank. However, in the blink of an eye, I was able to use pseudo-heavenly phenomenon to control swords. Therefore, you don't have to pity me. If you want to pity me, you should at least wait until you've truly entered the perfected finger profound realm." This woman's temper was truly terrible. She couldn't even be bothered to hide her schadenfreude and laughed loudly. Pseudo-finger profound realm and pseudo-heavenly phenomenon. It only sounds frightening. Su Fengnian, then won't you be at the Vajra realm for the rest of your life? I really want to take pity on you. Su Fengnian looked at this smiling face and laughed as well. Like I said, you look better when you're smiling. Xianyuan Qingfeng didn't deliberately hold back his smile and laughed wantonly. I'm really happy to see you in such a miserable state. Su Fengnian threw the nameplate back to Xianyuan Qingfeng. Although we're not familiar with each other, we're not strangers to the point where you need to hand over your nameplate to visit my house. In the future, if you come here again, you don't need to go through the front door. You can even climb over the wall to enter. As long as the good news I want from the western regions comes, I guarantee that your Mount Hui won't lack money or people. Xianyuan Qingfeng took the nameplate and placed it on the blue and white plate. Suddenly, his smile disappeared and he asked seriously, Su Fengnian, are you saying that a dying man's words are kind? Su Fengnian laughed and scolded, bullshit, Xianyuan Qingfeng. Can't you say something nice that doesn't sting people? Xianyuan Qingfeng said, when do you want me to go to the western regions to kill Han Diaoxi? Su Fengnian stood up and waved his hand toward the shore. Immediately, a young man with a huge iron bow on his back ran over. Su Fengnian pointed at the young kamikaze, Wu, who he had brought back from Beimang to the prince's mansion. He smiled at Xianyuan Qingfeng. This child's nickname is Yi. He'll take you out of Beiliang. There will be people from the western regions to meet you. The robust young man said softly, young master, next time when you introduce me, can you not say, Yi? My name is Wu. Su Fengnian slapped him on the head. You little idiot. Didn't you always say that you want to be the most outstanding kamikaze? Don't you think it's embarrassing to tell everyone your name and identity? The young man was stunned. He scratched his head and grinned. That's true. Su Fengnian smiled. Go. Take this ant to the western regions. Xianyuan Qingfeng silently took a deep breath. The young man agreed and turned to leave. From time to time, he would steal a few glances at the woman beside him. Ant? How old would he be? Almost 30? Could it be that she took good care of herself? Su Fengnian said behind Xianyuan Qingfeng, I'll make arrangements for Hong Yuang's whereabouts. Xianyuan Qingfeng turned around and smiled. You're such a good nephew. Su Fengnian laughed it off. What a woman who refused to be taken advantage of. After laughing, Su Fengnian walked to the courtyard where his second sister, Su Weisheng, was staying. The smell of medicine filled the air. He sat down at the head of the bed. She was still unconscious. For the past few days, Su Fengnian had been staying in the room. Other than washing up carelessly and changing into clean clothes, he hadn't slept much. The color of his clothes had gradually faded, revealing his white hair. He found it troublesome to dye it, so he had Blue Bird wash up and give up. Su Fengnian gently held her hand. The room was silent. The fire was big and smokeless, and the water was smooth and soundless. People's feelings were so bitter that they were speechless. Chapter 690. Beiliang was in turmoil. The news that Qin Jibao had entered Shu and was about to be made king had spread throughout the world. He was probably going to become the second king of Liang before Su Fengnian, the hereditary king of Beiliang. A simple and elegant carriage slowly stopped in front of the Chu manor. The gatekeeper, who was leaning against the side door and eating melon seeds, was a little stunned. The coachman was a young woman in green. She thought that the master of this manor was really not afraid of sending a servant girl into a tiger's den. However, when the gatekeeper saw the people coming down from the carriage, he was so scared that he kept quiet out of fear. His lips trembled as he threw down a handful of melon seeds and staggered out of the door. The first to come down was a white-haired man. He wore a white base and a black robe. He did not have much of an air of nobility, but his face was enough to make the gatekeeper nervous. In Beiliang, only this young master could keep his master in check. Behind him was the second son of the great general, Su Longxiang, the handsome Yuan Zuozong, and the tall and sturdy Qi Danghua. The four of them were all prominent figures who could not possibly visit the Chu manor. Now that they had gathered together, could it be that they had come to raid the manor? The gatekeeper hurriedly spat a few times. General Chu's loyalty was clear. No matter who they raided, they would not be able to get here. Seeing the rare guest at the front, His Royal Highness Su Fengnian, the quick-witted gatekeeper knelt down without another word. Just as he was about to muster enough energy to shout and make his master proud, Su Fengnian had already laughed and said, "That's enough. Stand up and lead the way." The group had just sat down in the main hall of the Chu manor when they felt the ground shake. Chu Lushan, dressed in loose casual clothes, stepped over the threshold and rolled into the hall. A lump of fat knelt at Su Fengnian's feet. "Lu Qiu has finally brought your highness to my humble abode. Your presence brings light to my humble abode." When I return, I will burn more incense for my ancestors. Su Fengnian kicked him. Humble abode? I don't think it's any worse than Bailiang Palace. Today, I've brought second brother Yuan and General Qi to your place to drink. Don't talk nonsense. Let's find a quiet place that isn't so tacky. With great difficulty, Chu Lushan staggered to his feet. He turned his head and gave the old steward of the residence a fierce look. Then, he turned his head and gave a fawning smile. A pair of soft and boneless white and chubby hands pulled on Su Fengnian's arm. There are good places to drink and drink tea. Later, if your highness is dissatisfied, Lushan can cut off 2 caddies of meat to drink. Su Fengnian said sarcastically, you're so fat, yet you're shameless enough to serve as food. The rest of us can't even eat. Chu Lushan said embarrassedly, it's Lushan's fault for not being able to grow a body that's fat and thin enough to go well with the wine. They arrived at a bamboo house. The purple bamboo was sparse and not dense enough to make one feel desolate. The small pond was deep and green. Sunlight shone through the gaps between the bamboo leaves. Beside the pond, there was actually a wild turtle the size of a palm dragging its family along to bask in the sun. When it heard the sound of footsteps, it slithered into the green pond. The small pond house was large and the lighting was ingenious. When they pushed open the door and entered, it appeared quiet and spacious. There wasn't the slightest sense of uneasiness. There was even a guqin with speckled patterns placed in the bamboo house. Sitting here, regardless of whether it was drinking or drinking tea, it could be said that the scenery and tea complemented each other. Su Fengnian glanced at the guqin. Outsiders didn't know the talent of Chu Lushan, but he knew the inside story. Chu Lushan was good at music, chess, calligraphy, painting, poetry, and poetry. It was a pity that he didn't have the appearance of a famous scholar. After sitting by the window, Chu Lushan poured 2 cups of wine for Su Fengnian and Qi Dangua. Holding the wine pot, he asked Yuan Zuozong with a smile, since you don't mind my dirty hands and the smell of wine, I'll be bold enough to pour a cup for you. Yuan Zuozong raised his eyelids. Chu Lushan took the opportunity to pour a cup of wine. Qi Dangua had a good relationship with Chu Lushan. Among the 6 adopted sons, he was the most popular one. He and the other 5 adopted sons of the same generation often visited each other's homes. A little girl from the Chu family was born a few years ago. She even recognized him as her adoptive father. The only thing he didn't do was to betroth the 2 children to each other. Chu Lushan often beat and scolded his other sons as if they were adopted. Only this little girl was doted on. He despised Qi Dangua's youngest son for having a coarse appearance. This made Qi Dangua ask Chu Lushan why his son was ugly every time they met in the past 2 years. Su Fengnian took a sip of wine and looked around. Among the 3, White Bear Yuan Zuozong had the highest military rank. He was a second-grade Jinan general, which was a real high position and power. In the Bailiang army, he was only half a grade lower than Chen Jibao, the governor of Bailiang. Yuan Zuozong was currently the deputy general of the Great Snow Dragon Cavalry. Chu Lushan was a primary 3rd-rank 1,000-bull dragon marshal general, but he did not have any actual military power. Qi Dangua was even worse. He was just a Zhichong chaplain with a very small official hat. However, in every large-scale battle, he was responsible for carrying the flag. Because Bailiang was under the control of the military and the government, and because Su Shao was once a first-grade pillar state and a first-grade agile cavalry general, and because the emperor was far away, the civil officials had the same rank as the Liang dynasty. Most of the generals could be 1 grade or half a grade higher. The imperial court also pretended not to see this. Even Grand Secretary Zhang Julu had said that Bailiang should be like this. Today, Bailiang didn't have a special civil official system. Just the generals who were 7th grade and above, not to mention the officials who had withdrawn from the border, still numbered as many as 80 people. Most of these people who supported Bailiang's 300,000-strong cavalry hadn't seen Su Fengnian with their own eyes. Su Fengnian finished a cup of wine. While Chu Lushan was pouring wine, he asked, Lu Qiuer, who do you think will be the governor of Bailiang? Chu Lushan said without hesitation, General Yuan. If it weren't for Zhong Hongguo, the cavalry commander, and Yan Wenluan, the infantry commander, they would have the qualifications and ability. But to be honest, General Zhong has a big prejudice against His Highness, and he has a complicated relationship with Qin Jibao. It's not suitable for him to be the second-grade governor. As for Yan Wenluan, he seems to be impartial and has a gap with Qin Jibao. But the old general has a gloomy temper and is more difficult to deal with than Zhong Hongguo. I've been watching him for more than 10 years, but I haven't heard him say anything bad about His Highness. On the contrary, it's not reassuring. In the end, General Yuan should be the governor of the two provinces. It's reasonable in all aspects. Why are you staring at me? I said this in front of His Highness and you, Yuan Zhuozong. It's the same in front of my adoptive father. Believe it or not. You don't appreciate my good words. You're hard to please. Yuan Zhuozong smiled and lowered his head to drink. Huang Manor had been squatting beside the zither in a daze. Su Fengnian said calmly, Lu Qiu'er, give me a list of names. I'll promote 1 or 2 ranks as appropriate. If it's really necessary, it's okay to skip 3 ranks. Chu Lushan took out a stack of paper from his sleeve and handed it to Su Fengnian with a smile. Yuan Zhuozong frowned and coldly stared at Chu Lushan, who could predict the future. Su Fengnian smiled and spread out 3 pieces of paper on the table. There were more than 60 people on the paper. In addition to the names, there were concise military resumes. The advantages and disadvantages were clear at a glance. The writing was Chu Lushan's unique semi-cursive. It was dangerous but not strange. It was natural and unrestrained. Su Fengnian read it all and pushed it to Yuan Zhuozong. After reading it carefully, Yuan Zhuozong's eyebrows slightly relaxed. There were more than 10 people on the paper who could be classified as Chu Lushan's direct subordinates. But most of them were the frustrated middle and lower-level captains in the Bailiang army. What they had in common was that they were young and good at fighting. They were full of vigor without any lethargy. Su Fengnian asked with a smile, Lu Qiu'er, don't you have any scruples? Won't you take it out later? Chapter 691. Sitting like a small hill, Chu Lushan chuckled and said, there's no need for that. The general is my adoptive father who was willing to die for me. Needless to say, Your Highness is the master that I, Chu Lushan, am willing to submit to. It's pretentious to hide these things from you. By the way, there's one more thing that has been stuck in my throat for many years. I have to get it out today. If I'm wrong, please don't take offense. Su Fengnian nodded and said, let's hear it. Chu Lushan sat upright and said, there are nearly 1,000 civil officials in Bailiang who can be called high-ranking officials, but they're all a mess. Most of them retired from the Bailiang army. They're good at leading soldiers, but they're just laymen when it comes to governing and pacifying the people. There are only a few of them who don't disturb the people. They're all honest and good officials whom the people are grateful for. Most of these people have a lot of bad temper that is a good habit in the army. They're protective of their children and help their relatives instead of reason. They're rude and unreasonable when governing their families, not to mention being awe-inspiring officials. Fortunately, the people of Bailiang are used to suffering and are afraid of being poor. Otherwise, if they were placed in any place in the Liang dynasty, they would probably start an uprising. Moreover, officials protecting each other has become an incurable disease. Those old generals who are idle at home can find a big brothel and drink casually, and you can meet a few of them. As for the sons of generals behind them, it's fine if they dare to join the army. Most of them can be considered promising. As for those who stay at home, 9 out of 10 of them are domineering playboys who have no regard for law and discipline. Their only ability is to harm the people in the village. Motherf *Ker, Yuan, are you addicted to staring at me? How can I say this to my adoptive father? Do you really think that my adoptive father can't see this kind of situation? It's not easy for him to do it. They're all old brothers who have been fighting with him for decades. Let's not talk about anything else. I, Lu Qiu'er, will tell you about the Meng family in Lingzhou 2 years ago. Old General Meng and his 2 sons died beside you at the concubine's tomb. Do you remember? In the end, his only grandson grew up, stole someone else's wife, and hired a hitman to kill an entire family of more than 40 people. But what could foster father do? With a crack, the incense of old General Meng was cut off just like that. How many bastards have tried to test foster father's bottom line over the past 10 to 20 years? Yuan Zhuozong snorted. For the first time, Chu Lushan said in a flustered and exasperated manner, the Confucian school of benevolence and righteousness has always placed the word benevolence before the word righteousness. If you're not righteous, you're just not a subject. If you're not benevolent, you're not even human. In today's world, if things were done according to legalism, it would be even more chaotic. In the past 1,000 years since Sage Zhang, for a whole 1,000 years, Confucians and scholars have been trying to find a balance between the two opposing concepts of benevolence and righteousness. Do you really think it's a simple matter? It's not easy to seize the world on horseback, but is it easy to defend the world under horseback? After saying this, Chu Lushan quickly wiped the sweat on his forehead with his sleeve and slapped himself a few times. He said in a low voice, "I've forgotten myself. I should slap myself." Su Fengnian gently changed the topic and said with a smile, "Let's get to the point. This time, I'm here to tell you, Lu Qiu, to let the people like Wei Fuqing go. Don't make things difficult for them." Su Fengnian paused and said flatly, "Also, Su Xiao promised me to let you be the governor of Beiliang." Chu Lushan fell back and the whole bamboo house shook a few times. The fat man sat on the ground with his eyes blank and forgot to stand up. In fact, it was the first time for Yuan Zhuozong and Qi Danghua to hear this shocking news. Yuan Zhuozong didn't move and looked calm. The latter opened his mouth wide and couldn't say a word. Su Fengnian didn't look at Chu Lushan and said to the other two, "Brother Yuan, General Zhong Hongwu will definitely resign in a fit of anger. At that time, you can take over. General Qi, you will take over the 6,000 iron Futu cavalry and Wei Fuqing's crossbow cavalry. Ningame will be your deputy. If you think it's too little, I can give you more. If you think it's too much, I won't care." Yuan Zhuozong put down the wine cup and said, "I won't refuse." Qi Danghua rubbed his cheeks hard, "Your Highness, can I do it?" Su Fengnian joked, "You can't let me be a general, right?" Chu Lushan got up with a sad face. When he was about to speak, he saw His Royal Highness waving at the window. Not long after, a beautiful woman holding a little girl timidly stood at the door. Chu Lushan ran over and slapped her face, "You blind thing, who let you disturb His Highness's drinking?" The child in the young woman's arms cried loudly. Chu Lushan held her in his arms and comforted her softly. The woman's mouth was bleeding, but she still endured the pain and gracefully bowed to everyone in the room. Yuan Zhuozong and Qi Danghua didn't find it strange. They didn't get up or return the bow. Only Su Fengnian walked to the door and smiled, "Greetings, sister-in-law." The woman with the beautiful face was uneasy. She was only a concubine of the Chu mansion. How could His Royal Highness call her sister-in-law? She didn't know how to deal with it. Chu Lushan coldly said with disgust, "Go back." The woman bowed again and slowly left. Su Fengnian didn't look at her and just stared at the little girl. He reached out to pinch her cheeks, but she dodged. He had to withdraw his hand helplessly. "Lu Qiu, your daughter looks like her sister-in-law. No wonder you don't want to be betrothed to General Qi." "Little girl, how old are you?" The little girl with tears on her face pouted and didn't speak. She was sulking. Chu Lushan had to smile and said, "She's only 3 years old. She speaks much later than other children. But the first word she says is father. I'm so happy. She can walk for half a year, but she likes to stick to people." Chu Lushan rubbed his daughter's rosy cheeks and said with a smile, "Come, call His Highness Crown Prince father." Su Fengnian didn't know whether to laugh or cry and scolded, "Get out of here." The little girl wasn't very sensible, but she already knew how to protect her own. She puffed up her cheeks at the big bad guy who spoke so fiercely to her father. She didn't breathe in or out, but her little face soon turned red. Chu Lushan laughed, "This is her trump card. I don't know where she learned it from." I can't do anything about it every time. Su Fengnian was also amused. Let her rest for a while. Be careful that she doesn't pass out. Chu Lushan quickly kissed his daughter's forehead. Changxing, be good. Father will give you beautiful clothes later. Don't be angry. The little girl raised her head and smiled brightly at her father. Then, she turned to look at Su Fengnian and began to puff up her cheeks to hold her breath. However, she couldn't stand being tickled by Chu Lushan and soon broke down. She could only hide in his arms and not look at Su Fengnian. Su Fengnian held his belly and laughed. Oh, are you blaming me for not giving you a greeting gift? Little Changxing, do you know that I gave your father a second-rank Bailiang protector? Do you think this gift is not enough? Well, I'll say it here today. If I have a son in the future, I'll let you be my daughter-in-law. Chu Lushan said with ecstasy, Your Highness, Lu Qiu is serious. Su Fengnian nodded, You are serious. But the premise is that your daughter doesn't change 18 times. Chu Lushan said excitedly, Don't worry, my Changxing takes after her mother. She won't be ugly in the future. Chu Lushan turned his head and said, Yuan Zuozong, Qi Dangua, you two have to testify for me. If His Highness goes back on his words in the future, I'll have to rely on you two to speak for me. Yuan Zuozong got up and said, It depends on my mood. Qi Dangua laughed heroically. He only felt comfortable all over. The green ant wine on the table was not enough to drink. Su Fengnian made a face at his little daughter who secretly glanced at him. Then, he said to Chu Lushan, You don't have to see me off. Watching the four people walk on the bluestone path that he had carefully piled up with his own hands, Chu Lushan waited until their figures gradually disappeared from his sight. Then, he carried his daughter to the pool and sat down. The little girl called out to her father. Chu Lushan came back to his senses and said with a smile, Little Changxing, it depends on whether you have the life to be the empress in the future.